Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got pregnant Bulma Chichi and Android 18? And subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, sat behind a desk that had somehow accumulated more paper than the entire Great Ninja War had produced in documentation. 3 stacks leaned at troubling angles. A 4th had already surrendered to gravity and fanned across the floor like a defeated army. Shikamaru, sitting across from him with the composed exhaustion of a man who had accepted his fate long ago, was walking him through border patrol requisition forms. Sign here, Shikamaru said, sliding a document forward. Naruto signed. And here. Naruto signed again. And here, and initial here. No, that's a signature line. Initial means just the first letters of your. I know what initials are, Shikamaru. Then why did you write your full name in a font that curves upward at the end like you're proud of it? Naruto opened his mouth to respond, realized he had no good answer, and was spared by the door slamming open with the force of someone who had stopped knocking years ago. Konoha stumbled in, his flak jacket singed at the collar, a thin line of blood at his temple, and an expression on his face that Naruto recognized immediately. The look of someone carrying news so strange they hadn't fully processed it themselves yet. There's a situation, Konoha said. Shikamaru closed his eyes briefly. There's always a situation. No, I mean a situation. Eastern Gate. You need to come now. The eastern gate of Konoha was a broad archway flanked by 2 towering wooden guard posts that had been rebuilt so many times after various apocalyptic events that the current structure used materials from at least 4 different construction eras, which gave it a patchwork quality that the architectural historians called historically layered and that everyone else called a mess. Today, the gate itself was not the issue. The issue was what was happening 50 meters in front of it. A man was fighting one of Naruto's ANBU teams, and he was losing. But the reason he was losing was because he kept making the fight worse for everyone, including himself. Every time a kunai came close, he would perform a hand seal and tear open what could only be described as a wound in the air. A dark ellipse, ringed with crackling blue-white energy, shimmering and unstable. Things fell into these wounds. Rocks. Leaves. One ANBU agent had lost a boot. The rogue shinobi seemed to be using them as escape routes, leaping in and out like a man playing hopscotch across different realities. Except he was clearly exhausted and the portals were becoming less controlled with every use. Naruto assessed this in approximately 3 seconds. Rasengan, he said, mostly to himself. Please don't, Konoha said. Just one. The last time you said just one about anything, we had to evacuate the training grounds. That was different. The mushrooms were already on fire, Hokage-sama. One of the ANBU flickered to his side, mask tilted upward, the one that indicated urgency. The portals are destabilizing. Each time he uses them the energy signature is amplifying. Our sensor Nin estimate that if he opens one more at full force it could. The rogue shinobi, clearly hearing this and choosing chaos as his final option, slammed both palms together and screamed out a technique that Naruto had never heard before, in a dialect he barely recognized, from somewhere that sounded like the distant provinces where jutsu had been left to ferment in obscurity for generations. The air in front of the gate didn't just tear. It split. From ground to some impossible ceiling, a rift opened with a sound like thunder being played backward. A column of gyrating darkness and color shot through with something that looked distinctly like stars. Not metaphorical stars. Actual stars. A view of somewhere else, vast and cold and deeply wrong in a way that made every shinobi present take a step back on pure instinct. The rogue shinobi, his chakra spent and his plan clearly having exceeded his own intentions, collapsed. The rift stayed open. Naruto stared at it for a long moment. Inside the rift, inside what appeared to be a tear in dimensional space, he could see something. Not blackness. Not void. A sky, but the wrong color. A soft orange amber that reminded him of a particular sunset he had once watched from the top of his father's monument. Clouds moved in that sky. Slowly, distantly, somewhere, someone was moving on the other side. Shikamaru, he said. Shikamaru had, at some point, appeared at his shoulder. Don't. What if there are people? Then we send a sensor Nin through on a rope. A rope. A very long rope, yes. What if it closes before we can pull them back? There was a pause that lasted exactly long enough for Naruto to already be walking toward the rift, and for Shikamaru to already know that nothing he said was going to stop what was about to happen. This was, Shikamaru later reflected, the fundamental challenge of serving as chief advisor to Naruto Uzumaki. The man genuinely could not hear arguments against doing something heroic when someone might need help. It was less a flaw than a law of physics. Gravity pulled things down. Fire consumed oxygen. Naruto Uzumaki ran toward the problem. At least take a chakra beacon. Shikamaru called after him. Naruto caught the small paper seal Shikamaru flung his way without looking, slapped it to his arm, and stepped through the rift. What followed was 3 weeks that Naruto would spend the rest of his life trying to explain and mostly failing. The world on the other side was real in every physical sense. Gravity, air, sunlight, food that tasted like actual food, and people who were very distinctly alive and very confused by the arrival of a blond man in a white coat covered in flames and black patterns who had dropped out of a crack in the sky. He landed in what turned out to be a desert, not far from a road, and was found within an hour by a woman driving something that moved without horses and which Naruto spent 3 days trying to figure out, before he accepted that this world operated on entirely different principles than his own. Her name was Bulma. She was brilliant in the way that people who had never been told there were limits to what they could figure out are brilliant, not just smart, but structurally incapable of accepting the word impossible as anything other than a starting point. She had turquoise hair, wore clothes that would have caused a minor scandal in Konoha, and talked at a speed that matched her apparent thought process, which was very fast. She was also, she explained with remarkable casual confidence, currently separated from the father of her son, a prince of an alien warrior race, who was technically alive but had been increasingly difficult to communicate with, and whose idea of emotional processing was to destroy training robots in a chamber underneath her house. Naruto listened to all of this with the specific face he made when trying to understand something that defied his experience. It was an open face. An earnest face. Not the face of someone looking for an angle or bracing for a lie. Just receiving. Present. Bulma, who had spent many years around men who weaponized stoicism, found this profoundly disorienting. "You're actually listening," she said one evening, over a dinner her mother had prepared that was large enough to feed a small battalion, which Naruto was making a genuine attempt on. "Of course," he said, around something that he thought might be a dumpling. "Why wouldn't I be? Most people aren't, when I talk. That seems like their problem." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. A real one, surprised out of her, the kind she hadn't produced in a while. He met others in those weeks. Chichi, fierce and immovable, who lived in a house on a mountain and who, within 4 hours of meeting Naruto, had decided he needed to eat more vegetables and learn to sit with better posture. She was widowed in the particular complicated way of a world where death and resurrection were recurring themes rather than final states, and she held a grief that had cycled through so many iterations it had become something else. A vigilance, a protectiveness, a permanent brace against the next thing. She had sons she was ferociously proud of. She had opinions about everything and delivered them without apology. Naruto, who had been raised by a village that tolerated him rather than an individual who loved him, found her intensity not overwhelming but deeply comforting. She fed him. She argued with him about training versus academic study. She once threw a frying pan at a robot that tried to scan him for threat assessment, and hit it squarely between its optical sensors from across a room, then continued her sentence without interruption. He thought she was extraordinary. Android 18 he met under less warm circumstances. She was performing what appeared to be an impromptu sparring match with a very small bald man who was clearly much stronger than he looked, and who she was being careful not to hurt, which said something about her that her expression refused to. She had cold eyes that assessed everything in a silence that most people interpreted as hostility but which Naruto, after a few days, began to read differently. Not hostile. Careful. She had been made rather than born, and while she had built something like a life, a husband, a daughter, a home, there was always a layer underneath that operated with the wariness of someone who had learned that what was given could also be taken. He sat with her one afternoon while her daughter played nearby, and he didn't try to fill the silence, and she didn't ask him to. "You don't have to pretend to be comfortable," she said eventually. I'm not pretending, he said. She looked at him sideways. You're an oddity. Yeah, he agreed. I get that a lot. Something in her expression shifted. Not a smile, not quite, but an adjustment in some internal weather system. A degree or two warmer. He spent 3 weeks in that world. He helped, in the way that Naruto always helped, which was less strategy and more force of will and presence, and the specific stubbornness that had carried him from orphan pariah to Hokage. There was a crisis. There was always a crisis, apparently, in this world too, and he fought alongside people who moved like lightning and hit with the weight of small explosions, and he kept up well enough that when it was over, he had earned a regard that wasn't quite friendship yet but was clearly in the early negotiations. Bulma rebuilt the dimensional rift mechanism from the rogue shinobi's notes, which Naruto had photographed with a technique before crossing over, and she calibrated a way for him to return. They spent 2 evenings in her lab while she worked, and he told her about Konoha, and about Kurama, and about his father's face on the mountain, and about how for a long time the village that was supposed to be his home had treated him as something to be afraid of, and about what it felt like when that changed. She listened with the same attention he had given her. It seemed only fair. I think you're one of the strangest people I've ever met, she said, on the second evening, not unkindly. Strange how? Like, she paused, considering. Like you mean it. Everything you say. You just mean it. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said, yeah. It's annoying, she said, and the way she said it made it mean something else. The night before he left, the city was quiet, and the stars over this world were different, more of them, arranged in unfamiliar patterns. And Naruto sat on the roof of Capsule Corporation and thought about what it meant to be somewhere that wasn't home and to not feel entirely like a stranger. The portal opened at dawn. He stepped through. He arrived back at the eastern gate of Konoha to find Shikamaru sitting on a rock eating an onigiri with the expression of a man who has been vindicated by events. 3 weeks, Shikamaru said. It didn't feel like 3 weeks. You left me with the requisition forms. I'm very sorry about that. You're really not. I'm a little sorry. Shikamaru looked at him for a long time. Anything happen over there? Naruto thought about it. About Bulma's laugh and Chi-Chi's frying pan and Android 18's careful silence, and the stars arranged in unfamiliar patterns. Got some perspective, he said. 4 months passed. Konoha settled back into its rhythms. The paperwork, true to its nature, had not diminished in his absence. It had, if anything, grown, as if the stacks sensed opportunity, and had been multiplying like organisms in the dark. Naruto worked through them with the grim determination of a man who understood that being Hokage meant that the dream and the desk came as a set. He had meetings. He made decisions. He ate Ichiraku ramen with the fidelity of religious observance, and tried not to let anyone see that he sometimes looked at the sky and wondered about a different arrangement of stars. The letters arrived on a Tuesday. This was, in retrospect, the kind of detail that seemed meaningless and then later seemed like the universe having a very particular sense of timing. 3 letters, arriving the same day, delivered by 3 different courier birds from 3 different directions. One was wrapped in a capsule so precisely manufactured that it could only have come from Bulma's lab. One smelled faintly of cooking spices and had been sealed with such aggressive certainty that Naruto had to use a kunai. The third was plain, slightly crumpled, and sealed with tape, practical to the point of being a personality statement. He opened them in the order they arrived. The first was from Bulma. It was 3 pages long, written in handwriting that got progressively smaller as she ran out of room, and the first paragraph was pure scientific framing, an explanation of statistical probability and biological timing and a detailed note about how she had been working under the assumption that the portal travel might have disrupted certain biological rhythms and how she had therefore not initially connected the data points. And then, at the bottom of page 1, the turn. So, you're going to be a father. I've already started on the nursery. It's going to be incredible, obviously. I'm not asking for anything except your presence, when you can manage it. I know that's complicated. I don't do uncomplicated. B. He sat with that letter for a very long time. Then he opened the second. Chi-Chi's letter was 1 page, dense, and had been written with a brushstroke that communicated strong feeling at every punctuation mark. She began with 3 sentences about the state of his diet during the time they'd spent together. Inadequate, she had noted even then, too much instant ramen, she knew it, she had known it, transitioned without warning into a paragraph about the responsibilities of men who wandered into other people's lives and left impressions, then arrived at the central fact with the directness of a woman who had never once in her life seen the point of burying the lead. I am going to have a baby. Your baby. Don't make me come find you. Chi-Chi, and then a postscript. Gohan thinks you were honorable, for what it's worth. Goten wants to know if Shinobi can use energy blasts. I told him absolutely not. He read that last line twice, felt something very complicated move through his chest, and reached for the third letter. Android 18 had written 4 sentences. Apparently this is possible. The science surprised me too. Bulma has been helpful. Come when you can, there's no emergency, but come. There was no sign-off. Just, the end of the sentence, and white space. Naruto set all 3 letters down on his desk. He sat for a moment in the particular silence of someone who has just had the architecture of their future permanently altered and is taking the first inventory of what that means. Then he looked up at the wall opposite his desk, where the first Hokage through the 6 stared down with various degrees of gravitas, and he thought about what each of them would say. He could construct plausible versions of most of their responses. Hiruzen would be measured and philosophical. Tsunade would be loud and somewhat profane. His father, he thought, would have had a complicated expression that resolved, eventually, into something steady. You figure it out, his father might have said. That's what we do. We figure it out. Okay, Naruto said aloud, to no one. He stood up from the desk. He walked to the window that looked out over Konoha, the red rooftops, the winding streets, the faces carved in stone on the mountain, the 4th Hokage's face among them, watching the valley, and he breathed slowly, the way Jiraiya had taught him when he was young and overwhelmed and barely keeping the shape of himself together. In through the nose. Long pause. Out. He was going to be a father. 3 times. Across a dimensional barrier. To 3 women who were, each in their own way, terrifying in completely different directions. He had survived worse. He reminded himself, beaten a god once. He had persuaded tailed beasts to cooperate. He had filed, by Shikamaru's estimate, 4,700 requisition forms and had gotten through most of them without losing his mind. He could do this. There was, however, one voice he needed to consult first. Heard all of that, by the way, Kurama said from somewhere in the low warm hum at the back of his chakra. The tone was impossible to read precisely. Kurama had evolved over the years from contemptuous to sardonic to something that occasionally crossed the border into affectionate, though Kurama would sooner dismantle the entire concept of affection than acknowledge this openly. Every word. And? Naruto said, and nothing. I'm processing. Kurama, I said I'm processing. Do you have any idea how strange this is? You were gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And somehow in 3 weeks you managed to. I know. You are the single most improbable entity I have ever been attached to, Kurama said, and there was something in the voice that sat at the very edge of what Kurama would permit itself to feel. Not quite exasperation. Not quite all. Something in between. And I have been alive for several thousand years. I know, Naruto said again. They're good though? The women? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the surface level, not the practical, but the actual texture of what he remembered. Bulma building at midnight, the workshop lit cold and blue, explaining the mechanics of dimensional space with her hands moving faster than her words and her eyes lit the way eyes only get when someone is doing exactly what they were meant to do. Chi-Chi standing in her kitchen at dawn, making breakfast for everyone present and future, filling the house with warmth the way some people fill rooms with noise, not to fill silence, but because abundance was the only way she knew to love. Android 18 sitting with her daughter on the grass, not saying anything, just there, present in the specific way of someone who had chosen presence, who understood what it was to be made of strange materials and to choose to be something good anyway. Yeah, he said. They're good. Then, Kurama said, I suppose we'd better figure out how to get back there. He knocked on Shikamaru's door at an hour that Shikamaru registered with visible resignation, looked at Naruto's face, and immediately began making tea. How bad? Shikamaru asked. On a scale of S-rank mission to we need to rewrite international law? That scale, yes. Naruto put all 3 letters on Shikamaru's kitchen table. Shikamaru read them while the tea steeped. He read them again, slower. He set them down and was quiet for a very long time. So when you said got some perspective, Shikamaru said, yeah, in 3 weeks. I know. Shikamaru looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man building patience from scratch, brick by laborious brick. Naruto, I know, the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. I'm aware of my title, father of Shikamaru, 3 children, across a dimensional barrier, I know, one of whom is going to be half android, one probably part scion by proximity if the mother is at all Chi-Chi's human, and one who will presumably be some kind of genius given the genetic input from that side. Are you going to help me or not? Shikamaru picked up his tea, drank it slowly, set it down, looked at his oldest friend with the exhausted fondness of someone who had been cleaning up after genius impulsiveness for his entire adult life, and had made a kind of peace with it. Of course I'm going to help you, he said. When have I ever not helped you? Naruto's whole posture changed. Not dramatically, just a fraction, the specific unwinding of someone who has been carrying tension they were pretending not to carry. You're going to need to tell the council, Shikamaru said, already pulling out a notepad. I know, and Sakura, oh god, and Sasuke. I'll write him a letter. You're going to tell him in person. A very personal letter. In person, Naruto. Naruto sat down, picked up one of the letters, Bulma's, and held it in both hands, looking at the precise smallness of the handwriting on the last page. The sentences that got tighter and more condensed as she ran out of room, as if there was more she wanted to say but was choosing compression over vulnerability. I don't do uncomplicated, she had written. Neither, he thought, did he? He just had a higher tolerance for it. Outside the window, Konoha was waking up. The first light of dawn was beginning to find the tops of the trees beyond the village walls, and somewhere a cart was moving over cobblestones, and somewhere a child was yelling at a parent, and somewhere the smell of rice and fish and smoke was rising into the morning air, and the stone faces on the mountain looked out over all of it with the same unchanging steadiness they had always maintained. Naruto looked at his father's face on the mountain. You figure it out, he thought. He folded all 3 letters carefully, tucked them inside his coat, and reached for his own cup of tea. All right, he said. Let's make a plan. This was not their scheduled day. Their scheduled day was Friday, which gave everyone from Monday through Thursday the luxury of dreading it at a comfortable distance. A Wednesday summons meant something had happened, something that could not wait for the comfortable distance, and the 12 men and women who filed into the circular council chamber did so with the wariness of people who had learned, across decades of Hokage administration, that when Naruto Uzumaki called an emergency meeting, the emergency was rarely what anyone expected. Naruto sat at the head of the table in full Hokage regalia, which he had put on specifically for this occasion on the grounds that he was about to say something so unprecedented that he needed every available symbol of institutional authority visible and accounted for. The white coat with its flame pattern. The hat. He had even, for the first time in recent memory, done something intentional with his hair, which Shikamaru had noted on arrival with a kind of odd suspicion. You combed your hair, Shikamaru had said. I always comb my hair. You really don't. I run my hand through it. That's not combing. It achieves a similar outcome. It achieves chaos with occasional accidental structure. Shikamaru, the meeting is in 10 minutes. The council seated themselves. Elder Hamura, who had been attending council meetings since the era of the third Hokage and had developed a sixth sense for catastrophe, looked at Naruto's expression, then at Shikamaru's expression, then back at Naruto, and said nothing, which was how he communicated maximum concern. Naruto cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he said. I'll get straight to the point. There was a ripple of involuntary adjustment around the table. People sitting slightly straighter, pens finding their way to paper. The specific body language of a group preparing to receive information they were going to need to process carefully. 4 months ago, Naruto said during the incident at the Eastern Gate, I traveled through the dimensional rift that was opened by the rogue shinobi designated in the after-action report as Subject 11. I was in the parallel world for approximately 3 weeks, during which time I made contact with several individuals native to that dimension. He paused. I have recently received letters from 3 of those individuals. Another pause. Informing me that I am going to be a father. Silence. not the polite silence of people processing information. The very particular silence of 12 professionals simultaneously encountering a sentence that their existing frameworks were not equipped to parse. Elder Hamura said, very carefully, 3. 3, Naruto confirmed. 3 separate individuals. 3 separate women, yes, in a parallel dimension, correct. The silence continued for another moment. Then Choji's father, Choza, who was an exceptionally pragmatic man, leaned forward and said, and these women, they're all, the children are definitely? Yes, Naruto said. Choza leaned back. Nodded slowly. Alright then. This, Naruto reflected later, was why he had always respected Choza. Everyone else needed considerably more time. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Much of it was spent on questions for which Naruto had answers, and a significant portion was spent on questions for which he did not, and a small but memorable portion was spent on a heated procedural debate about whether the standard diplomatic framework for international relations applied to interdimensional relations, which Shikamaru had anticipated and had prepared a written brief on, which he distributed from a stack he had carried in under his arm with the weary efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for long enough to preemptively solve problems before they were officially problems yet. The brief was titled, in Shikamaru's handwriting, Preliminary Framework for Dimensional Relations, Parental Rights, and Associated Institutional Considerations, a working document. You made a brief, said the head of the Civilian Council, a woman named Isarabi who had the organizational instincts of someone who had spent her career turning disasters into filing systems. I made several briefs, Shikamaru said. This is the condensed one. How long is the full version? You don't want to know. At the end of the 4 hours, the council had reached a set of conclusions that Shikamaru had more or less predicted in advance. Because Shikamaru always predicted in advance, and the world's primary function, from his perspective, was to eventually confirm his predictions. The conclusions were, 1. Naruto would retain his position as 7th Hokage. His personal circumstances, while unprecedented, did not impair his professional capacity, and the alternative, removing the strongest shinobi in the world from leadership during a period requiring interdimensional relations, was obviously worse than the situation itself. 2. Travel to the parallel dimension would be classified at the highest security level. The existence of the dimensional bridge was not to be publicized beyond a controlled circle. This was less about embarrassment, and more about the entirely reasonable concern that if word spread about a crossable dimensional barrier, approximately 40% of the village's more adventurous shinobi would immediately attempt to use it. 3. Shikamaru would serve as point of contact for all administrative matters related to the situation. He accepted this assignment with the expression of a man adding one more geological layer to a mountain of obligation that had been building since he was 12. 4. Naruto would travel to the parallel dimension within the month to. The council's phrasing here was careful. Establish formal relations with the affected parties and assess the diplomatic and logistical requirements of the situation going forward. Diplomatic and logistical requirements, Naruto repeated, when the meeting was over. Would you prefer we'd call it what it actually is? Shikamaru said. No, actually, thought so. He told Sakura on a Thursday. He found her at the hospital, at the end of a shift, in the staff break room where she was eating lunch with the focused efficiency of someone reclaiming 12 minutes from a 14-hour day. She was still in her medic's coat, hair pulled back, a smear of something that was probably chakra-reactive ink on her left wrist from whatever diagnostic technique she'd been using. She looked up when he came in, clocked his expression, and set down her chopsticks. Sit, she said. He sat. Tell me, he told her. Sakura had, over the decades of their friendship, developed what Naruto privately thought of as the most comprehensive range of silences of any human being he'd ever encountered. She had a warm silence and an evaluating silence, and a furious silence, and a worried silence and a deeply, profoundly exasperated silence that she reserved for the specific category of things that only Naruto could produce. He was experiencing the last one now. It lasted for approximately 45 seconds. Then she said 3? 3, he confirmed. Naruto. I know. You were there for 3 weeks. I know. 3 weeks. 3 women. 3, she stopped. Picked up her chopsticks. Set them down again. You know what, I'm not going to do the math because I will spend the rest of the day doing the math and I have surgeries this afternoon. She looked at the ceiling. Are they healthy? The pregnancies? From what the letter said, I want medical reports. Actual medical reports, as detailed as the medical practices in that dimension can produce. I don't know the physiology. One of them is a what? An android? Half android. She was a human who was augmented. Sakura's eyes went to a very specific focus distance that meant she was categorizing a medical variable. That's interesting actually. The fetal development implications would be, she stopped herself. Okay. Here is what's going to happen. You're going to give me every piece of information you have about the medical conditions available in that world. I'm going to put together a set of recommendations, and then you're going to take those recommendations with you when you go. She pointed at him with a chopstick. And you're going to actually follow them, not approximate them, not use your best judgment, which has historically been questionable in matters not involving combat. Follow them. Yes, Naruto said. And you're going to tell me everything, going forward. Every update. Every development. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. The exasperation was still there, but something else was moving through it. The old current of their friendship. Something that had survived too much to be easily disrupted. She reached across the table and hit him on the shoulder, which was her version of a hug in work clothes. You're going to be a dad, she said. Yeah. 3 times over. Yeah. She seemed to search for the word. That's very you. Is it? Nothing about your life has ever been scaled for one, she said, and picked up her chopsticks again. And that was the most Sakura thing she had ever said to him, and he carried it with him for a long time afterward. He told Sasuke on a Friday, in person. Because Shikamaru had been right and he had known it, and there was no version of this where writing a letter was the correct move. He traveled to the outskirts where Sasuke kept a small house that was easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, which was the point, and found him sitting on the porch in the late afternoon, sharpening a kunai with the methodical rhythm of a man who found motion meditative. Sasuke looked up. Said nothing. Naruto sat down on the steps, put his hands between his knees, and told him. Sasuke listened without expression, which was his default, but Naruto had been reading Sasuke's default for more of his life than not, and he could see the microscopic shifts. The small adjustment at the corner of his mouth, the single vertical crease that appeared briefly between his brows, the way his hand stilled on the kunai at the specific moment Naruto said 3. When Naruto finished, Sasuke was quiet for a moment. Dimensional travel, Sasuke said. Yes. A parallel world. Yes. And in this parallel world, in 3 weeks. Yes. Another silence. The kunai resumed its methodical path against the whetstone. Are the women capable of handling themselves? Sasuke asked. This was so perfectly Sasuke. Not the question about the logistics, not the question about the politics, but the operational question about whether the people involved could handle the situation. That Naruto felt something loosen in his chest. Yeah, he said. Extremely. Then your primary problem is administrative, not protective. That's basically what Shikamaru said. Shikamaru is usually right. Don't tell him that. I don't talk to Shikamaru more than necessary. Sasuke set the kunai on his knee and looked out at the tree line, the dark eye and the ringed Rinnegan both settling on some middle distance. You'll manage it, he said. Not a question. I'll manage it, Naruto said. Your capacity for managing things that would break anyone else is genuinely irritating, Sasuke said. It always has been. Thanks. That wasn't a compliment. It was a little bit of a compliment. Sasuke made a sound that was not a laugh but was in the same zip code. Go, he said. Handle it. It took 3 weeks to prepare. Not because the dimensional travel itself was complex. Bulma's capsule device, which Naruto had brought back through the rift, contained enough technical data for Konoha's sensor specialists to reconstruct a stable version of the portal with Shikamaru managing the coordination, and a team of 4 Jonin providing the chakra anchoring. The portal could be maintained for 12-hour windows and would hold position at the Eastern Gate facility, which had been upgraded and secured in the weeks since the original incident. The 3 weeks were for everything else. There were, for instance, the pre-travel briefings, Naruto sitting with Shikamaru each morning going through scenarios with the thoroughness of mission planning, which was both helpful and occasionally absurd. Shikamaru had prepared a color-coded binder. You color-coded it, Naruto said. Organization is not a flaw. There are tabs. The tabs correspond to the 3 primary contacts. Blue for Bulma. Her section includes the technical notes. the Capsule Corporation location, and what I've assessed as her primary logistical preferences based on your accounts. Red for Chichi, household location, family structure, relevant cultural notes, Shikamaru, and gold for Android 18, which includes Shikamaru. Why is 18 gold? A pause. I had run out of other colors. You specifically chose gold. The binder only came with 6 color options and Shikamaru. Move on, Shikamaru said, and turned a page with the efficiency of someone declining to engage further. There were the medical preparations Sakura had compiled, in an extraordinary 48-hour sprint that reportedly involved very little sleep and an impressive amount of coffee. A comprehensive prenatal recommendation packet that she had translated into accessible language, copied in triplicate, and supplemented with a handwritten cover letter addressed to the medical professionals or whoever is managing care in the parallel dimension, which was, Naruto thought, both typical Sakura and genuinely useful. There were the conversations with Kurama. These happened mostly late at night, in the specific interior space that Naruto had grown up learning to navigate. The deep warm amber glow behind his eyes where the Ninetales lived, smaller now than the vast flooded chamber of his youth, reshaped over years of coexistence into something that felt less like a prison and more like a shared room, comfortable in the way that two people who have lived together long enough develop comfortable. Kurama was not a creature that expressed tenderness easily or without protest, but in the late nights of those 3 weeks, he was different. Tell me what you remember about them, Kurama said one night. Not in the tone of extracting tactical information. In the tone of someone who wanted to know, so Naruto told him. Properly, thoroughly, the way he'd been telling himself privately for 4 months. Bulma's laughter in the workshop. Chi-Chi's certainty at the stove. Android 18's measured silences that said more than most people's paragraphs. The half-android, Kurama said. She concerns me. 18? She can handle herself better than, not in that way. The pregnancy. She was built, not born. You said she'd been augmented? Do you know what her physiology can tolerate? Bulma's been helping. Bulma is brilliant, but she's not infallible. The child, Kurama paused. The child will have your chakra nature. Whatever percentage. That changes things for a body not originally designed to manage it. The child might produce chakra from the earliest stages of development. An ordinary human body can accommodate that because it's built to. A mechanical one might not. Naruto hadn't considered this. He lay still in the dark and considered it now. Can we do anything? He said. I don't know. Possibly. My chakra has always been adaptive to you in ways that are not entirely explainable. It might be possible to stabilize, if I'm close enough. If the pregnancy reaches a stage where it becomes an issue, then I need to be close enough. Yes, Kurama said. You do. The weight of that settled in over the next few days and changed the preparation from logistics exercise to something more urgent. Not panicked. Urgency and panic were different things, and Naruto had learned the difference over many years and many crises. But present. Real. The stakes had moved from abstract to specific, the way stakes always did when you put names and faces on them. 3 children, somewhere across a dimensional rift, who were partly made of him, and who had not asked for any of this, and who deserved, at minimum, a father who understood what he was walking into. He trained harder in those 3 weeks than he had in years. Not combat training. He had nothing to prove there. Chakra control training, the delicate kind, the kind that Kurama had always said was less about power and more about listening. He sat in the training ground in the early mornings before the village woke fully, and he practiced modulating his chakra to the finest degree. And Kurama gave guidance with the patience of a teacher who had learned patience very late, and valued it more for that. You're worried, Kurama observed, on the last morning. I'm Hokage. I have 3 kids on the way. 2 of them are in another dimension, and one of those might have complications I can't fix from here. That's a reasonable summary of a genuinely concerning situation. So yes, I'm worried. Good, Kurama said. Good? Worried means you're paying attention. Worried means it matters. You're only dangerous when you stop worrying and start being reckless. I was never reckless. You once ran into a rift in space-time while your chief advisor was still mid-sentence. That was a judgment call. It was characteristically you, Kurama said. But the children will need the version of you that worries as much as they need the version of you that runs headlong into things. Find the balance. It was the longest speech Kurama had made about anything personal in years. Naruto sat with it for a moment. When did you get wise? He said. I was always wise, Kurama said. I was just previously operating in a context where I had no incentive to share it. The night before he left, Naruto stood on the stone face of his own monument in the dark. This was a habit he had developed as Hokage, not a conscious ritual, just a place he ended up when he needed to think without the village watching. The wind was steady up here, and the valley below was a scatter of warm lights, and the mountain itself was solid and old and indifferent to personal crises in a way that Naruto found useful. He could see his father's face below him, Minato Namake's, fourth Hokage, the Yellow Flash, a man who had died to protect a village and a son who grew up never knowing him. Naruto had had many conversations with his father's memory over the years, with the residual echo he'd encountered inside himself, with the face on the mountain, with the stories other people told him, each one a piece of a portrait he was always filling in. What would you say, he thought at the stone face, about this? He stood in the wind and listened to nothing, which was the answer he expected, and which was fine, because the answer he'd heard in his mind for years, the answer built from everything he knew about who his father was, had always been some version of, do right by them. That's all. Do right by them. Minato Namake's had died protecting his son before he even had the chance to know his son. Whatever his failings and impossibilities, the evidence of his love was in every seal, every technique, every carefully laid contingency. In a father who had found a way to reach across death itself to give his son what he needed in the moment. He needed it. Naruto would not die for his children. He intended, quite firmly, to live for them. But the instinct, the bedrock one, the one underneath all the logistics and the council briefings and the color-coded binders, was the same one his father had carried. Do right by them. He looked at the lights of the village for another minute. Then he turned and jumped down from the stone face and landed in the square below with the soft ease of a man who had been doing that landing since he was young enough to be reckless about it, and walked back through Konoha's nighttime streets toward his apartment, and 6 hours of sleep and one last morning before the portal opened. He woke at 5. Packed efficiently, shinobi habit, 12 years of it, packing like every gram might matter. He included Sakura's medical packet. He included a sealed scroll of chakra-infused emergency supplies that Kurama had helped him prepare. He included the 3 letters, because they had become something like a fixed point, and fixed points were worth carrying. At the eastern gate, the Jonin team was already assembled. The portal shimmered between the gateposts, steady now, not the violent tear of the original but something calibrated, almost clean, a window rather than a wound. Through it, the amber sky of the other world was just brightening with its early light. Shikamaru was there. Of course Shikamaru was there. Binder? Naruto said. You have it. Medical packet? Sakura confirmed last night. Emergency scroll. Naruto. Shikamaru looked at him. You've done harder things than this. Name one that felt this specific. Shikamaru thought about it. The summit of 5 Kage. That was combat. The negotiation with the tailed beasts. Kurama basically handled that. The time you convinced the Cloud Village to. Shikamaru, you're stalling. I'm reminding you of your track record. For perspective. Shikamaru crossed his arms. Your track record is, objectively, remarkable. You have no serious failures. You have made things work that should not have worked. You have found family in places that family was not supposed to be. This is, in some ways, more of that. Naruto looked at him. Also, Shikamaru added, in the tone of someone making a minor concession, you're going to do fine. That's the most feelings you've ever said at once. And we will never speak of it again. Naruto laughed. A real one, the kind that started from his chest, and had some relief in it. And then he took a breath, squared his shoulders, turned to the portal. Through it, the amber sky was bright now. A world he'd left 4 months ago was beginning its morning. Somewhere in that morning, 3 women were waiting. Not for rescue, not for fixing, not for anything as simple as a hero arriving. Just for him. For presence. For the version of him that worried enough to show up and ran headlong enough to get there. He stepped through. The light changed. The air changed. The specific warmth of that world's sun settled on his face, different from Konoha's, but real. He was back. All right, Kurama said, with something that, just barely, Around the edges, against all odds, might have been excitement. Let's go meet our children. It dominated its block in West City the way a statement dominates a room, not aggressively, but with the calm confidence of something that had never needed to compete for attention. The main dome was white and vast, rounded at the top like a thought that had run out of edges, ringed at its base by secondary structures that housed labs and workshops and garages and at least 2 floors that Naruto, on his original visit, had never been able to get a clear map of because Bulma kept redirecting him whenever he got close. The lawn was immaculate. The signage was confident. There was a capsule ship parked in the east courtyard that Naruto was fairly certain had once been to space, because there was a very particular kind of scorching on the undercarriage that did not come from atmospheric weather. He stood at the main gate with his pack on his back and his coat in the wind and let himself have one moment of pure, uncomplicated looking. Then the front door opened and Bulma's mother came out. Mrs. Brief was a small woman with pink hair styled in a way that defied physics almost as aggressively as her daughter defied convention, and she had the specific warmth of someone for whom caring for people was less a decision and more a law of nature. She had met Naruto once, 4 months ago, for approximately a week, during which time she had fed him 7 times a day and called him dear with such consistency that he had begun answering to it. "Dear," she said now, spreading her arms from the doorstep. "Mrs. Brief," he said, and was immediately in a hug that smelled like cooking and something floral. "It's good to see you. You look thin," she said, holding him at arm's length and assessing him with the thoroughness of a customs official. "Are they feeding you? In your dimension? Very well, actually, I have an excellent ramen. Come inside. I made lunch. I made enough for everyone because I had a feeling this would be the day. I told Dr. Brief this morning. I said, something tells me today is going to be a day, and he said I always say that, and I said yes, but sometimes I'm right." She was already ushering him through the door. "Bulma is in the lab. She's been in the lab since 5 this morning, which I've told her is not appropriate for someone in her condition, but you know Bulma." "I'm beginning to," Naruto said. "And don't worry about the other thing," Mrs. Brief said, with the tone of someone waving away a small administrative detail. "Which other thing?" She patted his arm. "He'll be fine." Naruto had learned, in the years of being Naruto Uzumaki, that "he'll be fine" delivered in that particular reassuring tone almost always preceded something that was not fine. "Who's he?" Naruto said. Mrs. Brief had already disappeared into the kitchen. The sound of pots followed her like a supporting cast. The lab was on the 2nd floor of the main building, accessed through a corridor lined with white boards that Naruto had spent considerable time on his first visit trying to decode. The boards were dense with diagrams and equations and notations in a handwriting that moved fast enough to be slightly illegible, crossed out and rewritten and crossed out again in layers that recorded argument with itself. Some of the notations had small doodles in the margins, a cartoon face here, a star there, which were the evidence that the same person who produced this level of technical density also had a mind that occasionally needed somewhere small and human to rest. He knocked on the lab door. "If your dad, the thermal calibration is fine. I checked it twice. You don't need to recalibrate it," came the voice from inside. "If your mom, I ate breakfast. It was a full breakfast. I ate it with my feet on the floor and everything." "It's Naruto," Naruto said. A pause. Then the sound of something being set down. Then another pause, slightly longer, which he understood was the pause of someone deciding how to manage an arrival they had been expecting but had not quite prepared for, even though they had been preparing for it. The door opened. Bulma looked. He processed this carefully and honestly. Extraordinary. Not in spite of anything, just extraordinary. She was in work clothes, a fitted jumpsuit in dark blue with grease at the wrist and a pair of magnifying goggles pushed up onto her forehead, and her hair was pulled back, and she was 4 months along in a way that had not yet dramatically changed her silhouette, but had changed something in her face. A fullness, a new color, something that Naruto didn't have scientific language for and defaulted to, alive. She was radiantly, specifically, argumentatively alive. She looked at him with the same blue eyes that had been assessing things her entire life, and for a moment she didn't say anything. "You're actually here," she said. "Said I would be," he said. "People say things. I don't say things I don't mean." She studied him for another half-second. Then she stepped back and held the door open and said, "Get in here. I have things to show you." The things she had to show him were numerous. technically impressive, and in some cases genuinely alarming. She had designed, in the 4 months since sending her letter, alongside running Capsule Corporation, managing an ongoing pregnancy, and apparently eating breakfast with her feet on the floor, a comprehensive suite of prenatal monitoring technology that she described as standard plus my own additions and which Naruto understood about 30% of but listened to with full attention because 30% was enough to know it was sophisticated and full attention was the minimum she deserved. She showed him the monitoring unit, a compact device that tracked 17 biological indicators simultaneously, and could transmit data to a portable screen from up to 500 meters, which meant she could be in the lab and have her readings available without interrupting workflow. She showed him the designs for what she called the Environmental Adaptation System, which was a way of describing a bassinet that regulated temperature, sound, light, and air composition with enough precision that she had built in 4 redundant fail-safes. Because redundant fail-safes are not overcautious, they're engineering. What about the chakra aspect? Naruto said. She looked at him sharply. What about it? The baby's going to have chakra. From my side. I don't know to what degree. It might be significant. He hesitated. A friend of mine, who knows more about these things than most, raised a concern about biological compatibility. Whether a body not designed for it can accommodate the developmental chakra output. Bulma's expression shifted into the mode he recognized from her lab work. Problem receiving, categorization beginning. You're talking about energy systems. Basically, the scans haven't shown anomalous energy output. But I haven't been looking for chakra specifically because I didn't have a baseline to compare to. She turned to a second screen, pulled up a file, made a note. I'll need a detailed energy signature from you. Comprehensive. The same type I take from Vegeta or Goku for comparison. I can do that. And your, whatever it is. Kurama? He's part of that signature. He's been thinking about this too. Bulma looked at him with an expression that hovered between fascination and something softer. You have a giant demon fox living in you who's been thinking about your unborn child. He's more nuanced than that description. I know, I'm just... She pressed her lips together briefly. I'll add him to the scan parameters. She made another note. Give me a week with the data and I'll have a monitoring protocol that accounts for the chakra variable. She said it the way she said most things in the lab, as a statement of intent that doubled as a commitment. I'll have it. Not I'll try. Not I think maybe. A fact stated slightly ahead of time. Naruto looked at her, at the goggles pushed up in her hair and the grease on her wrist and the monitors showing 17 simultaneous readings and the note she just made, and felt, in his chest, the specific warmth of watching someone be completely and unreservedly themselves. What? She said, catching his expression. Nothing, he said. You're impressive is all. She opened her mouth to deflect. He could see the deflection forming, the self-deprecating joke, or the redirect to something technical, and then she didn't. She closed her mouth. Looked at him. Thank you, she said, which was clearly not what she'd originally intended to say, and she turned back to the screen before either of them could acknowledge how that landed. They were in the lab for 3 hours before the door opened without a knock. Naruto had been aware, in the particular alert but at rest way that Shinobi never fully turned off, of the energy approaching for about 40 seconds before it arrived. It was an energy unlike anything in Konoha, dense and hot and structured around the core of pride so fundamental it had basically become architecture, load-bearing pride, the kind that holds a personality together. He recognized it from his first visit. Vegeta walked through the door. He was wearing training clothes. His arms were crossed. His expression was the expression of a man who has decided on a course of action and is executing it without allowing any part of himself to acknowledge that the course of action contains emotional content. He looked at Naruto. Naruto looked at him. You came back, Vegeta said. I said I would. People say things. He said it with exactly the same inflection Bulma had used 3 hours earlier, which told Naruto a great deal about how long these two people had lived in each other's gravity. Bulma had not turned around from her monitor. Vegeta. I'm not here to cause a problem, Vegeta said. The fact that you're leading with that is statistically correlated with a problem being caused, Bulma said, still not turning around. I am simply... Vegeta stopped. Uncrossed his arms. Crossed them again. He was, Naruto noted, deeply uncomfortable in a way he was working hard not to show, and the work itself was visible, which meant the discomfort was significant. I want to be clear, he said, addressing Naruto directly, that whatever arrangement exists here, I have terms. Okay, Naruto said. Vegeta appeared briefly wrong-footed by how easily that landed. He'd expected resistance, probably. Naruto had learned, a long time ago, that the fastest way to defuse someone armored for a fight was to not give them a fight to armor against. The child, Vegeta said, and something in his voice changed on that word, just slightly, not enough for anyone less accustomed to reading people to catch, is being born in this house. Will be raised with access to this house. Whatever your presence looks like, that does not change. I agree with that completely, Naruto said. I am not asking for your agreement, I am stating the terms, and I'm agreeing with them because they're reasonable and you're right. Naruto looked at him steadily. The child should know this place. Should know Capsule Corporation. Should know you. Whatever you are to them, however this works, they deserve the whole picture. Vegeta stared at him for a long moment. The armor was still there, but something was shifting inside it, some internal reckoning happening fast and privately. You're not what I was expecting, Vegeta said. What were you expecting? Something I could more easily despise. This was, from Vegeta, remarkably candid. Naruto suspected it surprised Vegeta as much as it surprised anyone. Bulma finally turned around on her stool and looked at both of them. Are you two going to do the territorial thing now or later? Because I'd like to finish calibrating the secondary monitor before dinner. We could do it now, Naruto offered. Vegeta looked at him sharply. Get it over with, Naruto said, with a small shrug. You want to test me? I can see it. I don't mind. Better than it's sitting there. I don't need to test you, Vegeta began, with the specific indignation of someone who absolutely did need to do the thing being named. Outside, then, Naruto said. Wherever you train. Show me the gravity chamber. I heard about it. He tilted his head. I'm curious. The gravity chamber was underground. Access through a reinforced door that required a 6-digit code and Vegeta's palm print, which told Naruto that its existence was technically a Capsule Corporation asset, but its territory was Vegeta's. The room itself was circular, walls and floor and ceiling all a uniform reinforced white, with a gravity control panel on the outer wall and enough scorch marks on the interior surfaces to document years of training that had exceeded the room's design parameters on a regular basis. Vegeta set it to 300 times normal gravity. Naruto stood in it, felt the weight settle on him like a physical force, and engaged chakra instinctively, not all of it, just enough to distribute the load. Kurama's familiar hum adjusting in his system like a second spine. Vegeta watched him do this. Interesting, he said, with the tone of a researcher noting a result. Chakra, Naruto said. Works differently from ki, but the principle is similar. I know what chakra is. I've fought shinobi before. You people use hand gestures, some techniques. Not all. The orange energy form you used when you visited the first time, Vegeta said. That was something different. Sage mode. Natural energy, gathered from the environment. Different from standard chakra, broader, more connected. Naruto paused. I can show you if you want. Vegeta's eyes narrowed. Not hostile, assessing. The toad markings, pigmentation changes, yeah? I've got a cleaner version now. He let the sage energy begin to move, felt it come in from the environment the way it always did, from the rock under the facility, the air in the room, the faint heat of Vegeta's ki nearby, and the markings rose along his face, the pupils shifting to the horizontal slits of natural mode, the slight darkening around his eyes. Vegeta looked at him for a long moment. Different energy signature, Vegeta said. Not better or worse than ki. Different axis. That's a good way to put it, Naruto said. I know. I put it that way. Vegeta crossed his arms again. Your power ceiling, what's the top of it? Depends on what I have access to. With Kurama at full sync and sage mode, I've handled things that I don't have good frames of reference for comparing to your scale. Are you being deliberately vague? I'm being honest. I don't know your scale well enough to calibrate the comparison. Vegeta was quiet for a moment. The thing inside you, the fox. It's separate from you, and less separate than he used to be, a partnership. Yeah, something moved in Vegeta's expression. The weight of a word that meant more to him than most. Partnership. He had one of those, had always had one, with a man who was his rival and his foil and the person whose existence had done more to shape his own than anything else. And he understood in the bones of him what it meant for something competitive and wary to become something chosen. He did not say any of this. But Naruto read it. "Fight me," Vegeta said, and it wasn't a demand this time, or a territorial challenge. It was an invitation, the Scion version of one, translated from a language where respect and combat were so interwoven they were nearly synonymous, where you didn't show someone the fullness of your regard until you'd seen them under pressure. So they fought. The fight lasted 40 minutes and destroyed exactly one wall panel, 2 sections of flooring, and the gravity control panel, which shorted out at the 20-minute mark when a redirected ki blast clipped it at the wrong angle. After that they were fighting at normal gravity, which shifted the parameters enough that both of them had to recalibrate, and the recalibration itself became interesting. 2 different combat philosophies encountering each other, testing for gaps, finding that the gaps were different than expected. Naruto's style was chakra and shadow and speed and the particular chaos of someone trained in a system that prized adaptability above all else. He created clones that fought independently and absorbed information and dissolved, giving him a distributed network of combat experience feeding back in real time. He used the environment, worked the angles, changed ranges unpredictably. Vegeta's style was power and precision and the cold efficiency of a warrior who had been training since before Naruto was born. Ki blasts of surgical accuracy, movement that covered distance like punctuation, the specific economy of someone who had fought things large enough that every motion needed to count. They didn't break each other. They found each other's edges and tested them without crossing, which was a kind of conversation. When Vegeta called it, they were both breathing harder than either would have chosen to admit. They sat on opposite sides of the ruined gravity chamber in the particular silence of 2 people who have just learned things about each other that words wouldn't have conveyed. "You're stronger than you look," Vegeta said. "You're meaner than you look," Naruto said. "I look very mean." And yet, Vegeta's jaw worked. Then, quietly, like he was making a structural concession in an argument he'd been having with himself, "The child is going to be powerful." "Yeah," Naruto said. "Probably. It will need training." "Yes. Real training. Not whatever soft curriculum you run in your village. Konoha's curriculum is not soft. You grow vegetables in the academy. That's community integration, that's a whole separate." "I will train the child," Vegeta said, which was not a request or a negotiation. But it was also, Naruto could hear this clearly now, with 4 months of imagining Vegeta and 3 hours of being in his actual presence, not a territorial claim. It was an offering. Dressed in the wrong clothes, speaking the wrong language, but an offering. "Let me be part of this," it meant. "Whatever this is. Let me give the child something." "Okay," Naruto said. Vegeta looked at him. "You agree easily for someone whose parental rights are supposedly equal. Your offer is good for the kid. Why would I refuse it?" A pause. "Most men in your position would see it as competition." "I'm not competing with you, Vegeta. We're not on opposite sides of this." The sentence landed in the space between them and Vegeta looked at it, looked at Naruto, and something shifted again in the architecture of his expression. Not warm, exactly, but less fortified, like a city opening a gate. Just slightly. Just enough for light to get through. "I'm going to check on the control panel," Vegeta said, standing. "It'll need replacement. I'll add it to the list." "How long is the list?" "Long," Vegeta said, and left. Dinner at Capsule Corporation was, architecturally, an event. Mrs. Brief cooked for 6 and had made enough for 12, which left no one hungry and a significant amount of food for tomorrow, which was clearly the intended outcome. The table was in the main dining room, large enough to be a proper table but arranged with the warmth of something meant for family rather than formality, though the distinction in this household was blurry because the Briefs ran both at once with easy simultaneity. Dr. Brief was a small man with a long white mustache and eyes that, behind thick glasses, contained a great deal of intelligence that he deployed with a lightness that could be mistaken for casualness by people not paying close attention. He had shaken Naruto's hand on arrival with the warmth of someone genuinely pleased, asked 3 precise questions about dimensional mechanics that revealed he had been paying very close attention to everything Bulma had ever told him about the rift, and then said, "Glad you're here, son. in a tone so natural that Naruto had to spend a moment understanding what he'd heard. Son. It was the specific warmth of a very small word. Bulma sat across from Naruto at the table, eating with good appetite and carrying on 3 simultaneous conversations. One with her mother about the monitoring upgrades, one with her father about a separate corporate matter, and one with Naruto about the chakra skin protocol she was already designing in her head, which meant some of her sentences were partial and picked up minutes later mid-thought and finished without preamble, which should have been confusing but wasn't, because Naruto had discovered that if he simply stayed present and tracked the threads, the pattern was actually coherent. Vegeta sat at the far end of the table and ate efficiently, and said almost nothing, which was different from being absent. He was there. His eyes moved, tracking the room, the conversation, Bulma, Naruto, the food, Bulma again. He had the quality of someone maintaining presence at the cost of performance, which was, Naruto had come to understand, Vegeta's version of effort. After dinner, Mrs. Brief produced dessert in quantities that suggested she had expected at least 2 more guests, and then Dr. Brief excused himself for his evening workshop time, and Mrs. Brief cleared with the efficiency of someone who had been running this household for decades, and Vegeta, without comment, stood and went somewhere deeper in the building, leaving Naruto and Bulma at the table with the evening settling around them. This again tomorrow, Bulma said, picking up a thread from 3 hours ago. I want to do it at 7. I'm a morning person, Naruto said. Good. Most people aren't, and I find it irritating. She turned her water glass in her hand. The chakra readings, will it bother you? Being scanned? I don't know the protocols around your. It's fine. It's not invasive in a way that matters. He paused. Kurama will be aware. He might want to observe what you're doing. The fox is observant. The fox is many things. Will I be able to tell when he's observing? Probably not. He's subtle when he wants to be. He doesn't sound subtle. He's been around 9,000 years. He's had time to develop range. Bulma looked at him with the expression she wore when something interested her that she hadn't expected to interest her. What's it like? Carrying someone else's consciousness? Is it like sharing a body? Does he know everything you know? Not everything. It's more like, he thought about how to describe it. Like having someone very close who you can feel even when they're not in the room, who's genuinely in the room somewhere, but chooses when to be present in the conversation. He paused. The honest answer is that the longer it's gone on, the more it stops feeling like 2 separate things. We're still ourselves. But the line is softer. Bulma was quiet for a moment. Then Vegeta's like that with me sometimes. Except he'd never say it that way. He'd say something like I'm simply in proximity. Naruto laughed. She smiled. Really smiled. Not the sharp performance smile she used for difficult conversations, but the one that was unguarded and a little surprised by itself. Then she said more quietly, this is going to be strange. Yeah, he agreed. I'm good at strange. I was raised in strange. Strange is basically my native ecosystem. She glanced down briefly, not at anything specific, just inward. But this is, I want the baby to have everything, all of it. This place, this family, you, your world, whatever is accessible. I don't do things halfway. I know, Naruto said, and I am going to be the most involved, most prepared, most technically equipped parent this child has ever had access to. I believe you completely, but I'm also, she stopped. Started again. I am also, occasionally, in the very early morning, before the lab and the monitors and the protocols, a little scared? He offered. She held eye contact. I was going to say uncertain. Of course, he said. But yes, she said. The other thing too. They sat with that for a moment, the table between them and the evening outside and the particular specific weight of something real that couldn't be made into a project or a scan or a 17-page co-parenting agreement, even though all of those things were also happening and were genuinely useful. For what it's worth, Naruto said, I am completely terrified. She looked at him. You don't seem it. I've had a lot of practice seeming the opposite of what I am. A beat. Then she said me too, and it was the most unguarded she'd been, maybe, since he'd known her. He didn't try to fix it. He just stayed present, which was what he had, and which, he was slowly learning, was sometimes the most important thing to bring. Later, when the house had settled into its nighttime rhythms, Naruto sat on the Capsule Corp roof the same way he had 4 months ago. Different stars in a different configuration doing the same ancient work of making people feel small in a way that was, somehow, useful. She's remarkable, Kurama said. I know. And the Scion Prince. What about him? He'll be good for the child. Not in the soft way. But in the real way. Yeah. He will. Naruto looked at the stars. You caught all of that from in here? I told you. 9,000 years. I have range. Naruto smiled up at the sky. Kurama. What? Are you excited? A pause. A very considered pause. I am, Kurama said, and the complete absence of a caveat was the most significant thing he had ever said, experiencing a previously uncharacterized feeling. It is possible it is excitement. I decline to confirm that until I have more data. Sure, Naruto said. Stop smiling. I'm not smiling. You're absolutely smiling. I can feel it from in here. Stop it. Good night, Kurama. A warm, low rumble. The fox equivalent of a good night, given by something that would never say it plainly and didn't need to. Naruto lay back on the Capsule Corp roof under the wrong stars that were getting more familiar, and thought about tomorrow, the scan, the protocols, the next phase of figuring it out. And beneath the thinking, steady and certain as the stone his father's face was carved from, the knowledge that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Naruto was up at 5:30, which was his natural hour regardless of dimension, and had found the Capsule Corp kitchen already occupied by Mrs. Brief, who received his presence with the enthusiasm of someone whose greatest joy was having people to feed at unusual hours. She made him something she called a Western omelet, which was large enough to qualify as a geographic feature, and they sat together in the early morning quiet while she asked him about Konoha with the genuine curiosity of a woman who had raised a daughter that crossed planetary distances regularly, and therefore found dimensional travel notable but not categorically surprising. And the ramen, she said? You really eat it every day? Most days, Naruto said. It's less a food preference and more a philosophical commitment at this point. I could make you ramen. Mrs. Brief, you don't have to. I want to. She was already moving toward a cabinet. I've been meaning to try a miso base. Do you prefer pork or chicken? Pork, but genuinely, the omelet was breakfast. Ramen is a separate category. This was the kind of logic Naruto had no argument against. So he sat with his second cup of tea and watched Mrs. Brief begin assembling broth components with the ease of someone who had been improvising excellent meals for decades and had never once worried about whether the ingredients were technically correct. Bulma arrived at 6:45 in lab clothes with her goggles already on her head and a tablet in her hand, assessed the situation at the stove, said Mom, it's 6:45, and received in response a bowl of miso ramen that appeared as if from nowhere. She sat down, ate 4 bites automatically while looking at her tablet, then appeared to register what she was eating and looked at the bowl, then at her mother, then at Naruto. Did you request this? She said. She offered, Naruto said. She offers everything. That's the trap. You say yes to one thing and then suddenly it's 7 courses and you've agreed to stay for a week. She took another bite. It's very good, she told her mother. I know, said Mrs. Brief. At 7 exactly, they went to the lab. The chakra scan took 2 hours. Bulma had built, overnight, or possibly in the early hours of the morning. She was aggressively non-specific about when she slept. A modified energy detection array that she had calibrated using the key signatures she already had on file for Goku and Vegeta as baseline references, then adjusted for the structural differences Naruto had described between ki and chakra. The array was a ring of sensors at head height surrounding a central platform, connected to a processing unit that occupied most of one wall, and which was making the specific sound of a machine thinking hard. Stand here, Bulma said, indicating the platform. Don't do anything you wouldn't normally do. I want your resting state first, then we'll move through the different modes. How many modes do you want? All of them. That might take a while. I cleared the morning. She was already at the processing unit, fingers moving across the interface. Start whenever. Naruto stood on the platform and relaxed into his natural state, which for him involved a baseline chakra circulation that most shinobi maintained without thinking, the body's constant low-level management of its own energy, like breathing. He watched Bulma's screens populate with data and tried to imagine what the readings looked like from her side. Interesting, she said. Good interesting or concerning interesting? Interesting. Your baseline is already, you're running a dual signature. 2 distinct energy sources, concurrent, integrated. She was making notes rapidly. The second one is larger, significantly. That's Kurama. The fox is always on, we share the system. He's not separate anymore. Not the way he used to be, tell her, Kurama said from somewhere behind Naruto's sternum, in the rumbling tone of someone making a measured decision, that the larger signature is partially stabilizing the smaller one. Has been for years. The host chakra and the Bijou chakra have co-regulated to the point where separating them for measurement purposes would give inaccurate readings for both. Naruto relayed this. Bulma stopped typing. Looked up. It said that? He said that. The fox is in there right now, listening, and providing technically accurate information about its own integration process. Yes. That's, she looked at her screen. Back at Naruto. Back at her screen. That's actually incredibly useful. Tell him thank you. Tell her I don't require thanks. I require accurate data collection. He says, I heard the tone, Bulma said. Tell him the data collection will be accurate. A pause. She's competent, Kurama said, with the specific inflection of a significant concession delivered as a minor observation. He says you're competent, Naruto said. That's the nicest thing a 9,000-year-old demon fox has ever said to me. She turned back to her interface. Sage mode next. They work through every mode systematically. Standard chakra. Sage mode. Which made the processors spike dramatically enough that Bulma said a word that was probably not appropriate for a laboratory setting, and recalibrated 4 sensors in real time. Kurama chakra mode. Which made the readings go somewhere that required Bulma to switch to a secondary scale because the primary one was insufficient. The brief, theoretical touch of 6 paths chakra, which Naruto held for approximately 3 seconds before Bulma told him to stop because her processing unit was making a sound it had never made before and she wasn't sure it was a good sound. By 9 o'clock she had more data than she had expected and was vibrating with the specific frequency of a scientist who has received a significant result. Okay, she said, turning from her screens. Okay. Here's what I know. The baseline chakra your child will inherit, assuming standard genetic inheritance patterns, which I'm adjusting for given that nothing about you is standard, will be significant. Not at your level, because full inheritance of a Jinchuriki's Bijou is not a simple genetic transmission, but the natural chakra capacity will likely be in the top tier of what I've ever measured. Is that a problem? It's an engineering challenge. Which is different. She pulled up a secondary screen showing the fetal monitoring data alongside the new energy readings. The baby's own developing system is already showing a trace signature. See this? Here, at the edge of the baseline reading. That's not my equipment error. I've checked it 3 times. That's chakra, developing alongside standard biological processes. She looked at him. In terms of Kurama's concern, the co-regulation effect you described is relevant here too. The child's chakra system seems to be naturally integrating with its developing physiology rather than disrupting it. The body is building around it. That's good. That's very good, Naruto said, and the relief in his voice was audible and he didn't manage it. Bulma looked at him with something in her expression that wasn't quite soft. She didn't do soft in the lab. Or not obviously. But was the adjacent thing, the one that meant I see you. It's going to be okay, she said. Medically. I'll keep monitoring. I'll flag any changes. But right now the readings are they're good, Naruto. The baby is healthy. He nodded. Took a breath. Nodded again. Good, said Kurama, very quietly, from somewhere behind everything. Right, Bulma said, turning back to her screens with the brisk efficiency of someone re-establishing professional footing after an emotional moment she hadn't fully planned for. I'm going to want weekly data transmissions. I'll build a receiver you can take back to your dimension. It'll need to interface with the portal's energy signature to transmit. But that's a solvable problem. I've already got 3 approaches I want to test. The lab door opened. Vegeta came in like weather. Not dramatic entrance weather, just the atmospheric kind, where you become aware of a change in conditions before you've consciously processed the cause. He was in training clothes again. He had the look of someone who had made a decision and was executing it before he could reconsider. I want to continue from yesterday, he said. Bulma didn't look up. Good morning, Vegeta. Good morning. I want to continue from yesterday. I'm in the middle of a scan. The scan is finished. He looked at the screens. You've been looking at the data for 20 minutes. I've been analyzing the data for 20 minutes, which is a different. The active scanning portion is complete, Vegeta said, with the tone of someone who had been observing technical processes in this lab for years and retained more than he was given credit for. He looked at Naruto. You're not doing anything. I'm being present while the data is analyzed, Naruto said. That's not a task. Emotional support is absolutely a task. Outside, Vegeta said. Gravity chamber. You broke it yesterday. I've replaced the control panel. It took 4 hours. It's ready. Bulma finally looked up. She looked at Vegeta, then at Naruto, then back at Vegeta, with the expression of a woman who had long since developed a comprehensive taxonomy of Vegeta's moods and was performing rapid classification. What is this about? She said. Training, Vegeta said. Vegeta, I want to observe the Jinchuriki chakra mode more closely. In the scan it was data. In application it's different. I'm a physical learner. You're deflecting, Bulma said. I'm training. Those aren't mutually exclusive, and you know it. She looked at him for a long moment, and whatever passed between them in that look was something that existed in a private language built over years of proximity, argument, and the specific intimacy of two people who had never been easy with each other, and had chosen it anyway. She turned to Naruto. You don't have to. I know, Naruto said. He looked at Vegeta. Let's go. Vegeta's posture shifted minutely. Not relaxation exactly, but the adjustment of someone whose real question has been answered. He turned and walked out. He needed to know you'd say yes, Kurama said. Not whether you could fight him. Whether you'd come. Naruto followed. The replacement gravity control panel was newer than the one it had replaced, which Naruto noted with the appreciation of someone who recognized quality engineering when they were about to be subjected to it. Vegeta set it to 250, slightly below yesterday's opening, which Naruto read correctly as deliberate, a different kind of invitation. They warmed up separately, which was its own conversation, two combat philosophies stretching and moving in the same space, each one getting a peripheral read on the other without pretending to. Naruto ran chakra through his limbs and felt the familiar warmth of Kurama's energy available underneath like a reserve tank, and breathed, and let himself be present in the room. The shadow clones, Vegeta said, after a few minutes of this. How many? Depends on available chakra. Thousands if I need to. And they retain independence of action? Full independence. They're real in every functional sense. They think, decide, fight. When they dispel, I get everything they experienced. Naruto paused. It's basically a learning multiplier. Every clone that trains is me training. Vegeta absorbed this with the evaluating expression of a military strategist hearing a tactic for the first time. Inefficient use of ki by our system's standards. The energy output per clone would be, ki and chakra have different cost structures. Clones are expensive for almost anyone else. For me they're calibrated. Kurama's baseline gives me enough that the math is different. Because of the bijou. Because of Kurama, Naruto said, making the distinction clear without making it a point. Vegeta was quiet for a moment. The fox is more than a power source. To you, yes. How long did that take? Naruto thought about it honestly. Most of my life. We started as enemies. Moved to grudging necessity. Then to something else. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. Vegeta's jaw worked. He turned away, began moving through a warm-up form that was its own kind of communication, fluid and precise and carrying the weight of someone who had been training since before he had. The concept of choice. I know something about that, he said. Not elaborating. Not needing to. Yeah, Naruto said. I figured. They fell into a combat rhythm that was different from yesterday's. Yesterday had been a test. Today was more like conversation. Two people pushing and responding, not to defeat but to understand. Vegeta would apply pressure in a direction, Naruto would meet it and redirect. And the redirect would tell Vegeta something. And he'd adjust. And the adjustment would tell Naruto something. And so on. It was one of the things Naruto had always loved most about high-level combat. The information density of it. The way two people who were really fighting were also really talking. in a language that cut through everything you could perform in words. At the 20-minute mark, Vegeta stopped. Not from exhaustion. Something else, the child, Vegeta said. He was looking at the far wall. It won't know what it is. Naruto lowered his guard. What do you mean? The combination. He stopped. Started again. Scion blood exists in trunks. And in the half-blood children of Kakarot. But those children had context. They grew up knowing the weight of it. Your child will be, between things. From two worlds. Without a native category in either, Naruto looked at him. Is that something you know about? A pause. Something moved in Vegeta's expression. The movement of a fault line, deep and slow, registering stress at the surface. I am the prince of a dead race, he said. Every scion context I was raised in has been gone since I was a young man. Everything I am is, inherited from a world that doesn't exist anymore, expressed in a world that doesn't fully understand it. He looked at Naruto. The child will have that. To some degree. It will have to build its own category. I know, Naruto said. I wanted to know I understand that. The sentence was very simple and very quiet, and contained a great deal that Vegeta had not said and would not say but had been trying to say since Naruto arrived. Naruto understood all of it. I'll make sure it knows, he said. Vegeta turned back to the fighting stance. Again, he said. Full chakra mode this time. I want to see the ceiling. Naruto engaged Kurama chakra mode. The gravity chamber filled with warm orange light. The specific amber gold of Kurama's energy expressed externally, which always made Naruto feel like he was standing inside a sunset, which was a description Kurama found undignified and which Naruto continued to use privately because it was accurate. The chakra cloak formed around him, the fox ears at his head, the tails of energy extending behind, and the room's gravity became a discussion rather than a constraint. Vegeta went Super Saiyan. The room became, for a few minutes, genuinely impressive. Naruto gave it full commitment, not the held-back, testing version of yesterday, but the real thing, the version that trusted the other person in the room to handle it. He was fast in this mode, faster than most things he'd ever encountered. He moved in patterns that his shadow clones fed into in real time, creating geometric combat situations that required multi-point tracking to predict. He hit with the specific power of someone running at the fusion of their own chakra and the stored strength of a nine-tailed bijou, which was a significant amount of force. Vegeta matched it. Not exceeded, matched. They were, Naruto established with some awe, actually comparable. Different in mechanism, close in output. Vegeta was pure power and precision. Naruto was adaptability and scale. The balance between them was the balance between different kinds of excellence. And the fight had the quality of something that didn't have a natural ending because either of them was going to find the gap in the other. They were on the third exchange of the full engagement, the room shaking in a way that was probably worrying from outside, when the door opened and someone came in. Both of them stopped. The person standing in the door was tall, dark-haired, and had the specific expression of someone who had been on his way to say hello and had walked into something significantly more energetic than anticipated. He was also, very obviously, not alarmed by this, not even slightly, in the way that someone becomes not alarmed when their baseline for daily life includes events that would be extraordinary anywhere else. Oh, said Goku. Are you guys sparring? Can I join? There was a very particular silence. Then Vegeta said Kakarot, in the specific tone he used for why are you here and of course you're here simultaneously. Hi Vegeta. I sensed the key from like 20 miles away and I thought something might be happening and it turns out something's happening. Goku's eyes moved to Naruto with the bright, uncomplicated attention of someone for whom new people represented primarily the possibility of interesting combat. You must be the shinobi. Bulma told me about you. Well, Chichi mostly told me about you. She mentioned you a few times. Good things? Naruto said. She said you had potential, Goku said, which in Chi-Chi's vocabulary, Naruto had come to understand, was a 5-star review. Also, Goku said, you're going to be the father of my kid's sibling, that's a thing I'm still figuring out how to think about. But you seem fine. You have good ki. Honest ki. I can usually tell. Naruto stared at him. You can tell things about people's ki? Not specifically, just impressions. Yours reads good. Solid. He tilted his head. Is the other signature Kurama? I've met Kurama before actually. Or, I met a version of the Biju's situation during the war. Different context. His expression was genuinely interested and contained no agenda whatsoever, which Naruto was finding slightly overwhelming after a morning spent navigating Vegeta's significantly more layered communications. Yes, Naruto said. That's Kurama. Tell the scion I remember him, Kurama said. Vaguely. He reads clean. Kurama says he remembers you and that you read clean. Oh, that's nice. Goku said. What does clean mean? I think it means straightforward. Uncomplicated energetically. Huh. Yeah, that sounds right. Vegeta says something similar but less nicely. He had already drifted into the room and was looking at the scorch marks on the walls with the happy recognition of someone reading a combat history. So what are we doing? Spar? Three-way? I haven't had a good three-way spar in months. Vegeta keeps saying he needs to think before we do it, which means he's planning something and waiting for the right moment. I do not plan, Vegeta said. I prepare. That's the same thing. It is categorically not the same, guys, Naruto said. Both of them looked at him. He had been running at high chakra mode for several minutes and the room was still warm with it, and he looked at Goku. At this man who was Chi-Chi's husband in whatever complicated sense that remained true, and who was the father of Gohan and Goten and who loved fighting with the pure uncomplicated love of someone for whom it was genuinely play, and who had walked in here and immediately started trying to make it larger and more inclusive in a way that was so instinctive it probably wasn't even conscious. And he felt the specific warmth of recognition. You're not upset, Naruto said. Not a question. Goku blinked. About what? Chi-Chi, the baby. Naruto watched him. You're not upset with me. Goku scratched the back of his head, which Naruto had already identified as his gesture for thinking about something that didn't come pre-packaged in neat language. I've been dead a lot, Goku said. I've been away a lot. I love Chi-Chi. I really do, but I'm not always, he paused. I'm not always there in the ways that count. I know that. She deserves someone who shows up. A beat. So does the baby. I plan to show up, Naruto said. Yeah. Goku looked at him with that clean, direct assessment. I can tell. He smiled, bright and uncomplicated as sunlight. So we're okay. I mean, it's weird. But most things around here are weird. You get used to it. I'm starting to, Naruto said. Great. Goku turned to the room at large with the energy of someone who has resolved an emotional conversation and is ready to redirect to something more kinetic. So can we spar? Oh no, Kurama said. Sure, Naruto said. Oh no, Kurama said. The three-way spar lasted 1 hour and 17 minutes and resulted in the following damages. The replacement control panel, destroyed again, this time in the first 20 minutes, 3 sections of the reinforced floor, 2 wall panels, 1 ceiling tile, and a water pipe behind the east wall that began a very determined leak approximately 40 minutes and that nobody noticed until afterward when Vegeta stepped in the resulting puddle with a specific expression of aristocratic offense. It also resulted in the following non-structural outcomes. Naruto learned that fighting Goku was a fundamentally different experience from fighting Vegeta. Vegeta fought with craft and will and the cold precision of someone who saw combat as a discipline to be mastered. Goku fought with joy. Pure, uncontained, endlessly renewable joy. He was delighted by every new technique, adjusted to it in real time, found the playful response to it, and pushed harder not from anger or pride but from the genuine enthusiasm of someone having an excellent time. It was, Naruto thought, like fighting Might Guy if Guy had infinite power reserves and fewer speeches. He created 200 shadow clones at the 40-minute mark. Oh wow, Goku said, genuinely delighted, pausing mid-technique to look around at the sudden population increase. There are so many of you. It's a problem, right? Naruto said, from approximately 6 simultaneous positions. It's amazing is what it is. Can they all do the orange energy thing? The chakra mode? Yes. Vegeta, look at this. I am looking, Vegeta said, from the position he'd taken at the edge of the room, which was the position of someone who had temporarily suspended participation to observe. Because even in a chaotic three-way spar, Vegeta was cataloging and assessing and filing data away for later use. He's going to spend 2 weeks thinking about the clone system, Kurama said. I know, Naruto thought back, with some satisfaction. When the water pipe made itself known and they called the session, all three of them stood in the slowly spreading water and evaluated the room with the particular equanimity of people for whom this was approximately a normal outcome. I'll fix the panel, Vegeta said. Second time in 2 days, Goku said. Yes, Kakarot, I'm aware. Maybe get the more expensive one this time. Maybe don't come in here and immediately escalate. I barely escalated. Naruto had the clones and everything was already. It is always when you appear that things. Guys, Naruto said again. They both stopped. I'm going to go get cleaned up, Naruto said. Then I'm going to lunch. Then I'm going to sit with Bulma and go through the data from this morning. He looked at Goku. And if you want to sit with me while I tell Bulma about my visit to Chi-Chi and Gohan and everything else, you're welcome to. Goku blinked. You'd do that? Yeah, even though you're her family, Naruto said. You're the father of her kids. Whatever the situation is between you two, you're important to Chi-Chi. I'm not interested in navigating around you. That's harder and worse for everyone, especially the baby. Goku stared at him for a moment. Then the smile came back, but quieter this time, not the bright combat enthusiasm one but the one underneath it, the one that was apparently reserved for moments of genuine appreciation. Okay, he said. Yeah. I'd like that. Vegeta was looking at the water spreading across the floor. He said nothing, but something in his posture had changed. A slight release, somewhere in the architecture of how he held himself, a small reduction in the load he carried, as though something he had been tensed against had been quietly resolved. Lunch was, again, an event. Mrs. Brief had, at some point during the morning, determined that the correct response to Goku's arrival was to significantly increase production, which she had done, and the kitchen counter held enough food that Naruto estimated they could have fed his entire ANBU division comfortably. Goku showed his appreciation by immediately beginning to eat at a speed and volume that Naruto, who had always eaten enthusiastically, found genuinely impressive. You two, said Bulma, pointing her chopsticks at Goku and Naruto, are the same person. We really aren't, Naruto said. You eat the same. You have the same energy in a fight. You both have things living inside you with more personality than most people. Kurama's not living in Goku. Goku has instinct, Bulma said. Ultra instinct is a technique. It's not a Goku began. It talks, Bulma said. It has preferences. It sometimes overrides what you want to do. That's a personality. That's just my body's learned response to. It's a personality, Bulma said, with the finality of someone who made final statements for a living. She's not wrong, Kurama said. The afternoon settled into something that had the quality of a strange and specific peace. Goku eating and occasionally asking Naruto questions about shinobi techniques with the enthusiasm of a person for whom all combat information was interesting. Bulma analyzing the morning's scan data and periodically making notes or asking follow-up questions. Mrs. Brief moving through the spaces between them providing food and warmth as required. Naruto sat in the middle of it and thought about Shikamaru's color-coded binder, about Sakura's medical packet, about 3 letters on a Tuesday that had rewritten his architecture, and about how strange it was that strange things, given enough time and goodwill, could become something that resembled ordinary. Not ordinary. The wrong word. Familiar. That was better. The process by which the unprecedented became the context you moved through. He realized, already beginning to learn the shape of this family. Bulma's competence and buried softness. Vegeta's armored love, which expressed itself in challenges and presence, and a grief about his dead world that he would never fully name, but which informed everything he cared about. Mrs. Brief's radical, unsolicited warmth. Dr. Brief's quiet intelligence. Goku's uncomplicated joy and the complicated loneliness it sat beside, the loneliness of someone who loved profoundly, and was always somehow partly elsewhere. The child he and Bulma were going to raise into all of it. Overwhelming, Kurama said. Not critically. Just naming it. Yeah, Naruto thought back. You're doing well. Am I? You're still here. For you, that's usually sufficient. Naruto smiled into his tea, and across the table Goku caught the smile and grinned back with no idea what it was about, and no need to know. That evening, after Goku had departed in his characteristic fashion, which was to say, he said goodbye and then appeared to remember 6 additional things he wanted to ask about, and the goodbye extended for another 40 minutes. Naruto found Vegeta on the Capsule Corp roof. This was, he had come to understand, Vegeta's version of the same thing Naruto did on the monument in Konoha. Every person who carried something heavy needed a place to put it down temporarily, and stand without it. He sat down beside him without invitation, which he knew Vegeta would find aggressive and which he did anyway, because sometimes the only way to get into a room with someone who doesn't open doors was to be through the door before they could decide. Vegeta said nothing. But he didn't leave, which was the part that counted. They sat in the silence for a while. The city spread below them, lit and moving, full of the sounds of a civilization that had been catastrophically damaged and rebuilt several times and had chosen, each time, to rebuild, which was a quality Naruto found deeply recognizable. "You're going to come back," Vegeta said eventually. It wasn't a question, but it was looking for confirmation. "Yes," Naruto said, "after Chi-Chi. After the android. You'll come back here, on a schedule. As consistent as I can make it." He paused. "Bulma and I are working out the details. But yes, I'll come back. The child needs consistent reference points," Vegeta said, with the careful deliberateness of someone translating from an internal language into one that could be shared. "Yeah," Naruto said. "It does." A pause. "I know what it is to be raised without them," Vegeta said. Then, immediately, with the instinct of someone who had said more than they intended, "That's not relevant information." "It's completely relevant information," Naruto said. "It isn't, Vegeta." "Let it go," Vegeta said, with enough finality that Naruto let it go, not because he agreed with the finality but because he understood that some concessions were about timing rather than truth, and the truth wasn't going anywhere. "The child's going to have you," Naruto said instead. "Whatever else it has or doesn't have, it'll have you." "That matters." Vegeta said nothing. "I mean that," Naruto said. Still nothing. But the silence had changed quality, not closed, just full. The way a silence gets when something real has been said into it, and the person receiving it is deciding what to do with the weight. "After a while," Vegeta said, "the control panel is going to need to be reinforced differently. The standard casing wasn't built for three-party combat conditions." "Probably a good upgrade," Naruto agreed. "I'm going to spec something custom. It'll take a week. Want me to stay for it?" The question settled in the space between them. Vegeta looked at the city. "Bulma needs the chakra data reviewed against the weekly developmental readings," Vegeta said. "That sounds like a yes. It sounds like a medical requirement." "Sure," Naruto said. The wrong stars did their ancient work overhead. Below them the city moved and lit and existed with the stubborn persistence of things that had been broken and rebuilt and chose to remain. And the roof held them both, the prince of a dead world and the Hokage of a living one, in the specific silence of two people who were, against reasonable odds, building something, not friendship. Not yet. Maybe not ever, exactly. Some things found different shapes. But something. Something that had weight and would hold. "Not bad," Kurama said, so quietly it was barely a presence. "For a scion. High praise," Naruto thought. "Unprecedented praise," Kurama said. "Don't tell him." Mount Paozu was the kind of place that made you understand why people chose to live far from everything else. Not because it was remote in the barren sense, not empty or cold or indifferent, but because it had the specific quality of somewhere that had been loved into character over a long time. The mountain itself rose from a forest that was genuinely ancient, trees wide enough at the base that three people with linked hands couldn't have circled them, and the path up from the road below was worn smooth in the particular way of a path that had been walked by the same feet for decades. Same route, same rhythm, worn down not by traffic but by devotion to routine. Birds lived here that had no reason to leave. The air had the smell of pine and altitude, and something underneath that was harder to name, something that registered in the body before it registered in the mind. Home, that smell said. Specifically and deliberately home. Naruto stood at the bottom of the path and breathed it in for a moment before starting up. He had taken a different route from West City than the one Goku had described, which had involved 3 separate wrong turns, one unexpected river crossing that had required a brief application of chakra to avoid getting comprehensively wet, and a 40-minute conversation with a man in a village at the mountain's base who had sold him directions along with a very good meat bun and had asked, with the straightforward curiosity of someone living in a world where unusual things happened regularly, whether the orange-haired visitor was a friend of the Sun family. Working on it, Naruto had said. The man had smiled like that was a good answer and directed him up the left fork. The house appeared through the trees at the end of a clearing, and it was. Naruto had been prepared for this, he'd been told, and still the warmth of it hit him in a way he hadn't fully anticipated. It was a house that had been built for function and slowly, over years, had accumulated meaning until the function and the meaning were indistinguishable. The vegetable garden to the left side was dense and well-tended, staked in straight rows with the care of someone who approached gardening with the same conviction they brought to everything. A large cooking pot was visible through the kitchen window, even from outside steam visible. Firewood stacked against the side wall in an arrangement so precise it had achieved a kind of artistry. A training post in the yard, old and deeply worn, which told its own story. 2 boys had grown up here. One of them was now a scholar, and a warrior in equal measure. The other was currently sitting in the tree at the edge of the clearing, hanging upside down from a branch with the casual ease of someone for whom gravity was a preference rather than a rule. And he had seen Naruto coming before Naruto saw him. "Hey!" Goten yelled from the tree. "MOM, he's here, the shinobi guy is here." The kitchen window opened. Chichi's voice came through it with the carrying power of a woman who had spent years projecting across mountain distances. "I know, I can hear. Get down from that tree and come set the table like I asked you to. I was keeping watch." Set the table. Goten dropped from the branch with a backflip that landed him 3 feet in front of Naruto, grinning with the full-face enthusiasm of someone who had not yet learned to modulate joy for social purposes and had no plans to start. He was young, maybe 11 or 12, with his father's face and his mother's energy and an immediate, uncomplicated warmth that reminded Naruto startlingly of himself at that age. "Hi," Goten said. "I'm Goten. I know who you are. Mom's been cooking since Tuesday." "Since Tuesday," Naruto repeated. "She does that when she's, you know." He made a gesture with both hands that apparently communicated something significant is happening, and she's expressing it through food preparation, which Naruto understood immediately. "I'm Naruto," Naruto said. "It's good to meet you." "I know. Dad told me about you. He said you had really good ki and that you had a giant fox in you, which is the coolest thing he's heard in years, and Dad has heard a lot of things." Goten was already leading him toward the house with the natural authority of a young person on home territory. "Gohan's inside. He's been reading. He does that when he doesn't know what to do with himself. Mom says it's his equivalent of training." A pause, then, with some impressiveness of delivery for someone his age. "It's a coping mechanism." "Did your mom tell you that?" "Gohan told me that." "About himself. He's very self-aware." Goten said this with the tone of someone describing a mildly baffling but fundamentally admirable trait. "Are you self-aware?" "Trying to be," Naruto said. "That's probably the right answer." Goten pushed the front door open. "MOM, he says he's trying to be self-aware." The inside of the Sun House was an accurate expression of Chi-Chi's interior life, which was to say it was organized, warm, deeply intentional, and contained more food than seemed strictly necessary for the number of people living in it. The main room had bookshelves, more than the architecture seemed designed to accommodate, added in stages over the years as Gohan's academic appetite expanded, running floor to ceiling on 2 walls and overflowing onto a secondary shelf near the door that appeared to have been constructed specifically to handle the surplus. There were family photographs on the wall above the fireplace, and Naruto's eyes moved across them with the instinct of someone reading a history. A young Chi-Chi with a man whose face he recognized as Goku's but younger, grinning the same uncomplicated grin Naruto had already met. Gohan at various ages, growing from a very small serious child into a very large serious adult. Goten in phases of increasing size and decreasing patience for sitting still for photographs. There was one in the middle, larger than the others, central, that showed everyone together at some occasion, and Chi-Chi was at the center of it, and she was laughing, genuinely, in the way people laugh when they're caught rather than posed, and her whole face was different in it. Naruto looked at that photograph for a moment longer than the others. "She doesn't know I'm watching you look at it," said a voice from the reading chair in the corner. Naruto turned. Gohan closed his book around a finger to mark his page, a careful, practiced gesture, and stood. He was tall, which Naruto had expected from what he knew, and had the specific quality of someone who had done a great deal of growing in a great deal of directions and had arrived at himself with some equanimity about the journey. He wore glasses, which sat at odds with the key signature Naruto could feel from across the room, which was very large and currently very quiet, like a river running below ice. He looked at Naruto with his mother's directness and something else, something measured and patient, and older than his years, which came, Naruto suspected, from having been required to carry significant things from a very young age. "Gohan," he said, extending his hand. Naruto said, taking it. "I've heard a lot about you. From Dad, or from Mom?" "Both." "They said different things?" "That tracks," Gohan said, with the faint smile of someone who had made peace with being seen differently by the two most important people in his life. He gestured at the second reading chair. "Sit down. Mom won't let anyone in the kitchen while she's in the final stages of a meal, so we have about 20 minutes. Naruto sat. Goten had already disappeared somewhere. The sound of cupboards from what was presumably the dining area suggested the table was being set with more enthusiasm than precision. "I want to say something," Gohan said, sitting back down across from him and putting his book aside properly this time. "Before the dinner and before Mom cycles through everything she wants to say, which is going to take a while." He paused, organizing it. "I spent a long time being angry on her behalf. After Dad died the second time, the third time, each time she rebuilt something and then had to rebuild it again. I watched her do that, and I carried anger about it that I didn't always know what to do with." He looked at Naruto directly. "I'm not angry at you, okay," Naruto said. "I want to be clear about that. This situation is unusual. There are things about it that are complicated. But you didn't do anything wrong by being here the first time, and you're doing the right thing by being here now." A pause. "She's happy. Not performing happy, actually happy, in a way that's different from the maintaining forward momentum she does, which she's good at but which isn't the same thing." He looked at his book for a moment. "I noticed the difference. I've had a lot of practice." "She's remarkable," Naruto said. "She's the strongest person I know," Gohan said simply. "And I know some extraordinarily strong people." "I believe you." "Good." Gohan picked his book back up, which appeared to be his way of signaling that the serious portion of the conversation was complete, and that what followed could be more ordinary. "What do you know about the pregnancy? Has she given you data? A letter?" "I'm hoping to get more this visit. She'll give you comprehensive information and 6 opinions about your dietary choices," Gohan said. "Accept all of it. Argue with the dietary stuff if you want. She expects pushback, it's part of the process. But on the medical side she's been thorough." "She contacted Bulma." Naruto raised his eyebrows. "They talked?" "Extensively. I think it surprised both of them. Mom doesn't reach out easily and Bulma tends to assume she's the only person in any given situation with relevant technical knowledge. So the first call was apparently an exercise in 2 very strong personalities establishing territory, and then deciding to cooperate." He turned a page. "It worked out. Bulma sent monitoring equipment. Mom called it unnecessarily complicated and learned to use every feature within a day." "Yeah," Naruto said. "That sounds right for both of them." The kitchen sounds had reached a register that suggested completion was approaching. Through the wall, Naruto could hear Chichi moving with the efficient rhythm of someone who cooked the way other people breathed. Constantly, naturally, with a depth of practice that had made expertise invisible. "One more thing," Gohan said. Naruto waited. "Piccolo is going to stop by tomorrow. I didn't invite him. He doesn't require invitations. But he's aware you're here and he has thoughts about all of it." Gohan looked at him steadily over the top of his glasses. "He's going to be direct with you. He's always direct. Just be straight with him. He'll know if you're not." "I'm always straight," Naruto said. "Good." Gohan returned to his book. "Then you'll be fine." The kitchen door opened, and Chichi came through it. She was exactly as he remembered her and also, somehow, more. This was the thing about Chichi, Naruto was realizing. She had a quality of becoming more present the closer you were to her, as if she existed at a scale that required proximity to fully perceive. From a distance she was formidable. Up close she was the full thing, formidable and fierce and full of a warmth so specific and concentrated that it had weight. She wore a simple dress and an apron, her dark hair up, and she moved through her own house with the absolute authority of someone who understood that space was defined by whoever chose to inhabit it fully. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and looked at him. He stood up. For a moment, across the distance of the main room, they just looked at each other. It had been 4 months and a dimensional crossing and the complete transformation of both their futures. And somehow the moment of looking contained all of that without needing to say it. "You're thin," Chichi said. "I've been told that," Naruto said. "Who told you?" "Your husband's ex-wife's mother." "Ha!" Not quite a laugh. A single syllable of acknowledgement that carried within it the specific texture of a woman who had been inside a complicated constellation of relationships for so long that the complexity had become navigable. "Sit down. Dinner is almost ready." She turned back to the kitchen, then stopped. "You're going to eat 3 servings minimum. Don't argue." "I wasn't going to argue," Naruto said. She looked at him over her shoulder. Something shifted in her expression, a small recalibration, like a figure adjusting to unexpected ground. "Good," she said, and went back to the kitchen. "I like her," Kurama said, with the tone of someone who had made the decision and was not taking questions about it. "Me too," Naruto thought. Dinner was, structurally, an experience. Chichi had cooked enough food for approximately 8 people, which meant that with 4 of them at the table, Chichi, Gohan, Goten, and Naruto, there was still a significant surplus, and Goten approached this surplus with the energy of someone who viewed an excess of food as a personal challenge to be met. His eating speed was a calibrated thing to watch, not frantic, not messy, just relentlessly efficient in a way that made Naruto feel, for the first time in his life, like a moderate eater. "How do you do that?" Naruto asked him. "Do what?" "Eat that fast without anything." Goten looked at his bowl, then at Naruto, processing the question as if the answer was so obvious the question was almost confusing. "Half Saiyan metabolism," he said. "He's been like this since he was 2, Gohan said. "I've never been full," Goten said, with the peaceful acceptance of a fundamental fact about himself. "Not once. But the food is really good, so I keep trying." "It's very good," Naruto said to Chi-Chi, with complete sincerity. Because it was extraordinary, actually. She cooked the way she did everything, which was with absolute commitment, and no interest in half measures. The rice was perfect. The vegetables were seasoned with the confidence of someone who had calibrated to exactly this mountain's altitude, and these proportions over decades. There was a soup that was something between miso and something else, something with depth enough that Naruto's second spoonful tasted different from his first because the flavors had continued developing in the time between. Chi-Chi received the compliment with a nod that was not quite modest. She was too certain of her cooking to pretend at modesty, but was something like satisfied. "Eat more of the vegetables," she said. "I am eating the vegetables. You ate around the bitter melon. The bitter melon is important. Nutritionally. Eat it." Gohan met Naruto's eyes from across the table with an expression that communicated yes, this is what it's like. And no, there is no winning, and Naruto ate the bitter melon. The conversation moved through the meal the way conversations move in houses where people have been talking to each other for long enough to have real rhythms. Not forced, not performing, but alive. Goten had a great many questions about shadow clones, which Naruto answered in progressively more detail as Goten demonstrated that he was tracking it, and by the end of the meal they had moved into a theoretical discussion about the differences between ki splitting and chakra division that Gohan joined from the academic side with references to a paper he'd apparently written on comparative energy systems. "You wrote about it?" Naruto said. "I write about a lot of things," Gohan said. "The energy systems one was mostly theoretical, since I didn't have shinobi data. I can send you a copy. It might be interesting from your perspective." "I'd like that," Naruto said, and meant it. Chi-Chi was watching this exchange from her end of the table, and Naruto caught her expression when he looked her way, careful and quiet, in the specific way of someone watching their child in a moment they hadn't anticipated and finding that they're glad of it. After dinner, Goten disappeared with the focused urgency of someone who had remembered something important, and Gohan began clearing plates with the practiced efficiency of a son who had been doing this since he was old enough to carry them. Chi-Chi allowed the clearing and declined offers of washing up help from Naruto with the tone of someone for whom her kitchen was a sovereign territory with established rules about who operated within it. "Outside," she said, when the table was clear. I want to show you the garden before it gets dark. The garden in the mountain dusk was something else entirely. The light came through the trees at the angle of late afternoon tilting toward evening, gold and long-shadowed, and the vegetable rows that had looked orderly from the house were revealed up close to be also beautiful. Not in any decorative sense, but in the way that things tended with real care become beautiful without that being the intention. Tomato plants staked and tied. Bean runners in careful spirals. Herbs in a separate section near the kitchen wall, labeled in Chi-Chi's handwriting on small wooden markers. Chi-Chi walked him through it with the proprietary ease of someone explaining their domain. This variety for flavor, that variety for storage. The herb garden was her own design. She'd adapted it 3 times over 20 years as the mountain's growing patterns shifted. The compost arrangement on the far side was something she'd built herself after reading 4 different agricultural manuals, and deciding none of them were entirely right. You built it, Naruto said. I built most things that needed building, she said, matter-of-factly. Goku was rarely home for extended periods. I learned early that waiting was not a sustainable strategy. She said it without bitterness, which was the remarkable part. Not that the bitterness didn't exist somewhere. Naruto had learned enough about Chi-Chi in the weeks of his first visit to know that the feelings were real and had been real for a long time. But she had metabolized them into something functional, into gardens and suns and a house that ran on her will and her hands and her extraordinary capability, and the love that drove all of it had not diminished into resentment, but had found a way to coexist with it, which was its own kind of strength. How are you feeling? Naruto said. Physically, well, she said. Better than well. I've been pregnant before, twice. And this is similar in some ways and different in others. She stopped at the end of a row and looked at the bean runners without looking at them. The chakra your friend Kurama mentioned, I've had a healer look at it, a specialist Gohan found, who knows about unusual energy signatures. She said the baby is developing something alongside the standard biological process. A secondary system. Yes, Naruto said. Bulma's scans showed the same thing. Bulma explained it well, Chi-Chi said, with the specific tone of someone who had found another woman's competence irritating and impressive in equal measure, and had resolved the cognitive dissonance by simply respecting it. The system is integrating rather than disrupting. The healer used the word harmonizing. That's what Kurama thought would happen, Naruto said. The way he and I are integrated. It seems like the child is doing something similar at the foundation. Chi-Chi was quiet for a moment. What will it be like for them? Having that? I don't know exactly. For me it was difficult at first. Kurama and I weren't always. He chose words carefully. We needed time. But the capacity itself isn't bad. It's power, in the right context, and the child won't have the same starting point I did. It'll be born already integrated. Born with a tool they didn't choose, Chi-Chi said, looking at the mountain line above the trees. Born with a part of themselves, Naruto said, gently. That's different. She looked at him. The light was going now, the gold giving way to the blue-gray of early evening, and in this light her face was very still and very open in a way he suspected she didn't often allow outside the private hours. I spent a long time fighting to give my boys normal lives, she said. Academic structure. Discipline. A framework beyond power. Gohan understood eventually. Goten, a small, fond expression. Goten is his father's son in ways I've had to make peace with. She paused. I'm not going to pretend this baby will be ordinary. No, Naruto said, but I want it to have choices. About what it is. About what it does with what it's been given. She looked at him with the directness she used for things that mattered most. That's my condition. Not the only one, but the primary one. The child has choices. Yes, Naruto said. Completely. She nodded once. Good. She turned back toward the house. Come inside. I made dessert. He slept in the guest room, which was Gohan's old room, still carrying the evidence of a childhood spent in unusual directions. One wall had bookshelves floor to ceiling. The other had a training mark on the plaster about 2 feet up from the floor that had been painted over but not quite concealed. The window looked out at the mountain and the trees and the specific darkness of somewhere far enough from city light that the stars overhead were the full version, crowded and bright. Naruto lay on his back and looked at the ceiling and had a conversation with Kurama. She's afraid of losing another person to the fighting, Naruto said. Not out loud. The interior version, the one that had become as natural as breathing over years of shared habitation. Yes, Kurama said. That's the core of it. Everything she does, the structure, the discipline, the frying pan, the garden, it's all the same thing underneath. Protection, love expressed as armoring. She watched Goku go to death and come back and go again, and she built the only defenses available to her, which were, make the children capable in non-combat ways. Give them a world beyond the fighting. Give them something worth fighting for that isn't more fighting. And now her child is going to have chakra, and a Jinchuriki for a father. And a half-scion for a sibling situation. And access to 2 worlds. A pause. She's not unhappy about you, specifically. You should know that. I do know that. You need to hear it stated. Yeah, maybe. She looks at you the way she looked at the garden. Like something she intends to tend. Is that a good thing? From her? That's the best thing. Kurama was quiet for a moment. Sleep. Tomorrow is the Namekian. Piccolo. He's going to be intense. I can handle intense. You handle intense better than anyone I've ever been bonded to. Which is a short list but still. A warm low rumble. Good night, Naruto. The stars moved overhead in their long, slow arc, and the mountain was quiet around the house, and the house was warm with sleeping people, and Naruto let himself be inside it, inside the warmth of it, the specific warmth of a home that had been built from love even when love had not been simple, and slept. Piccolo arrived in the morning the way large things tended to arrive, with presents preceding announcement. Naruto was in the yard running forms when he became aware of a key signature descending from above with the deliberate ease of someone who knew exactly where they were going and was not in a hurry because arrival was already certain. He landed in the clearing with a sound like a cape in wind and stood there, very tall, green, with the specific expression of someone who had decided to come here for reasons they understood precisely, and were not going to explain until they chose to. Naruto stopped his forms. They looked at each other. You're the shinobi, Piccolo said. You're the Namekian, Naruto said. Something shifted in Piccolo's expression, not quite approval, but an adjustment. He had expected, perhaps, more performance. More social management of the encounter. Naruto meeting his directness with directness was something he appeared to note. Walk with me, Piccolo said. They walked up the mountain path that ran behind the house, rising through the trees to where the canopy thinned and the air changed and the view of the valley below became visible through gaps in the growth. Piccolo walked with his hands behind his back and said nothing for several minutes, which Naruto matched without difficulty. I've trained both of Chi-Chi's sons, Piccolo said eventually. Gohan told me. Then you know I have a perspective on this family that is particular. He glanced sideways at Naruto. I watched Gohan carry things that a child shouldn't carry. I watched Chi-Chi hold this household together through losses that would have dissolved anyone with less foundation. I watched Goten grow up in the shape of an absence. He was quiet for a moment. I am not Goku. I am not Vegeta. I don't frame my concerns in terms of power levels or combat potential. When I am concerned about someone, it is for the whole of them. And you're concerned about Chi-Chi, Naruto said. I'm concerned about what happens when you leave, Piccolo said. Not this time. The pattern. Your situation, multiple commitments across multiple locations, requires you to leave on a regular basis. She has experienced that architecture before. It has a specific effect on her. I know, Naruto said. Piccolo looked at him. Do you? She's spent her life rebuilding after people who meant everything to her returned to something larger than the house. Not because they stopped caring about the house, but because the something larger kept calling. Naruto stopped walking. Looked out at the valley. I'm not Goku. I don't disappear into battles for months. My leaving is scheduled, bounded, something we build a structure around together. It's still leaving, and I can't make it not leaving. But it's a different shape. Piccolo was quiet. She knows the difference, Naruto said. She's the one who insisted on the choices conversation last night. She's not under any illusions. She's choosing this with full information. And you? Piccolo said. Full information? I know what I'm taking on. 3 children, 3 families, 2 dimensions, a desk covered in the bureaucratic output of an entire hidden village, and whatever comes next that I can't predict. He looked at Piccolo directly. I don't pretend to know every implication. But I'm not running from any of it. Piccolo assessed him for a long moment. His face was not built for warmth in the conventional sense. The angular features, the green skin, the antennae, the cape. But Naruto had been reading people his whole life and he could see past the architecture. There was something behind the assessment that was not merely calculating. There was care. Real care, the kind that expressed itself as vigilance rather than softness, as watching over rather than hovering. She's going to push you, Piccolo said. I'm counting on it. She's going to have opinions about everything you do, already happening. I ate the bitter melon. She's going to feed you constantly, also already happening. A pause. Then something in Piccolo's expression, very small, nearly invisible, but there, the bitter melon is non-negotiable, he said. I would know. Naruto looked at him. She feeds you too. She feeds everyone who enters this property. It's not optional. He turned and started back down the path. Come. She'll want you in the garden before lunch, and if you're late she'll assume something happened and send Goten to look for you. And Goten loses focus on the way and you'll spend an hour finding him. Has that happened? Multiple times, Piccolo said, with the tone of someone carrying the specific weary affection of a person who has been finding Goten in trees for years and has incorporated this into their schedule. The afternoon was the quietest part of the visit, and somehow the most important. Goten had dragged Gohan into a training session in the yard that was primarily Goten attempting techniques and Gohan patiently explaining why the techniques needed adjustment, which was a dynamic that appeared to be both long-standing and genuinely functional despite Goten's periodic impatience with the explaining portion. Piccolo had settled on a rock at the edge of the clearing in the specific way he apparently settled in all places, with complete stillness and the quality of a presence that was watching everything without appearing to watch anything. And Naruto sat at the kitchen table with Chichi while she went through what turned out to be an extremely comprehensive folder. He had expected notes. Chichi had produced a folder. The folder contained a developmental timeline she had assembled from 3 separate medical references plus Bulma's equipment data, color-coded by trimester. A dietary plan that addressed not just her own nutritional needs but a projected plan for the child's early dietary development based on Naruto's chakra nature combined with the sun, family's known metabolic patterns. A schedule of her preferred communication, not a demand carefully framed as a preference, which he understood took something from her to frame that way, weekly, via whatever system Bulma could provide for cross-dimensional messaging. And at the back of the folder, in a separate smaller section, a single page, handwritten, that was not a plan or a schedule or a medical reference. It was a list of things she wanted the child to know, not achievements. Not goals. Things she believed mattered. How to treat people. How to keep a home. How to work hard at something that doesn't reward you immediately. How to protect without diminishing. How to love people who are difficult to love, because those were usually the people who needed it most. Naruto read the page slowly. You can add to it, Chichi said, watching him read. It's not complete. I wrote what I know. You should write what you know. Okay, he said. The child needs both. All of it. From everywhere it comes from. Yes. She folded her hands on the table and looked at him with the expression she reserved for important things. I need you to understand what I'm giving here, she said. I don't. I have not made it easy for people to be part of this family. I have high expectations. I have a way I want things done. I have watched people fail this family in ways that took years to recover from, and I built walls because of it. A pause. I'm not taking the walls down. But she looked for the word. Opening a door, in one of them. I know, Naruto said. I won't take that lightly. No, she said, studying his face. I don't think you will. She stood up and moved the folder to the counter with the efficiency of someone who had said the important thing and was ready to move to the next. Now. Dinner. I need you to peel the sweet potatoes. You can do that? Yes, Naruto said, standing. Don't peel them too thin. People always peel them too thin. How thin is too thin? She looked at him. You'll know when I tell you you've done it wrong. Fair, Naruto said, and went to wash his hands. The last evening came the way last evenings did, with the specific weight of an end that isn't permanent, and the specific difficulty of that weight regardless. After dinner, After Goten had shown Naruto 6 new techniques he was working on and Gohan had promised to send the energy systems paper and Piccolo had departed back up into the mountain with the brevity of someone who didn't do goodbyes but had communicated, in the quality of the day's presence, everything he needed to, Chi-Chi and Naruto sat on the porch in the mountain dark. It was cold up here in the evenings, genuinely cold, and Chi-Chi had brought 2 blankets from inside with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who anticipated needs without making a performance of it. She handed him one without comment. He took it without comment. They sat. Below the mountain, somewhere in the valley, a light was moving on the road. Above them the stars. When do you go to 18? Chi-Chi said. Day after tomorrow. I want to give her enough time before I have to start the return journey. Chi-Chi nodded. She's difficult to read, she said. We've spoken. Her and I. It was awkward. What did you talk about? The logistics. What Bulma's equipment can and can't do. Whether the 3 of us should coordinate, or operate independently. She paused. We agreed to coordinate where it makes sense and maintain independence where it doesn't. She suggested that framework. I found it sensible. That sounds like her. She's careful, Chi-Chi said. About everything. She measures before she speaks. It's different from me. Said without judgment, just observation. But I think she's good. For the child. A pause. For you. You're all good, Naruto said. In different ways. She looked at him sideways. That could be taken as a deflection. It's not. It's specific. He thought about how to say it. Bulma is going to give the child engineering and a worldview built on the premise that everything can be understood and improved. That's a gift. You're going to give them roots. Structure. The understanding that love isn't just a feeling, it's a set of actions you choose to perform consistently. Also a gift. Different. Necessary differently. Chi-Chi was quiet. And 18, he continued, is going to show them what it looks like to build yourself into something good when the raw material wasn't originally pointed in that direction. That's also a gift, the one I maybe needed most, when I was young. Were you? She said quietly. Raw material not pointed in the right direction. He thought about the child he'd been, the village pariah, the container, the boy who had chosen to be seen as loudly as possible because invisible had been intolerable. I was pointed entirely in the wrong direction by everyone around me, he said. Except for a few people who decided to look closer. She looked at him for a long moment, and something moved in her face. The particular emotion of a mother who has just heard something about a child's early life and is retroactively unable not to be concerned about that child even though that child is now a 30-year-old Hokage. You're all right now, she said. It wasn't quite a question. Yeah, he said. I'm all right. She turned back to the view and pulled her blanket tighter and said, in the tone she used when something mattered enough to say plainly, good. They sat in the dark for a while longer. The mountain breathed around them, cold and certain and indifferent in the useful way. The stars did their ancient work. She's going to be incredible, Kurama said softly. As a mother. She already is. I know, Naruto thought back. Your child is going to be. I know, Naruto. I know, Kurama. He sat with the warmth of it, the full weight of it, the specific joy and terror of it. I know. Inside the house, Goten knocked something over and called out that he was fine before anyone asked. Gohan's voice came back, measured and familiar and fond, and Chi-Chi, on the porch, made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was related to one, warm and brief and real, the sound of someone who was exactly where they had built themselves to be,